in their headsets. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of Logitech, Bracken Darrell. Thank you. Welcome.
Is there a clicker? A mysterious clicker?
There should be a mysterious... here it is. Sorry.
Okay.
See, we had to hide it because it's not a Logitech.
It's not beautiful, and it's not, yes. No, it's kind of beautiful, depending on how you look at it. Well, first, it's great to be here, and I want to thank all of you for being patient enough to sit here and listen for the next 30 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever it takes. I'm going to talk a little bit about design, but how many people here are from Switzerland? Great. So I'm not. That might surprise you, but I fell in love with Switzerland about. I guess it was about 10 years ago. I had been to Switzerland before, but I moved to Lugano. And I had the amazing experience of spending 4 great years of my life in Lugano. And I, of course, was traveling around Switzerland at the same time. And it was an amazing experience. And I love so many things about Switzerland that I won't go into now. But when I was fortunate enough I was not working for Logitech at the time, when I was fortunate enough that Logitech came and was looking for somebody to come in to work in the company. I sort of felt like I not only found Switzerland again in a company that's global, but I really have a chance to feel like I'm part of Switzerland all the time. So you'll understand that more in a little bit. But I'm going to talk a little bit about design. And design is a very, very oft discussed topic these days. And so some of what I say may sound a little familiar, but I'll try to give you a perspective on, at least why I think design is absolutely central to what everybody's doing, including whatever you're doing. How many people here have a startup or are working in a startup? Okay. How many people are working in a bigger company? Okay. Okay, so how many people are working in a big company? Okay. This will be interesting. Okay, so that, by the way, that product I'll be selling throughout this presentation. Thank you for selling our gaming headsets. This is an amazing product. This is a brand new product called Craft, which is a keyboard that has what looks like a watch dial on it, a crown, and that crown actually does some really cool things. It works directly inside of Adobe Photoshop or inside of Microsoft Office. You can change font sizes with it. You can saturate an image with it. You can expand an image or shrink it. So it's a new way to use a keyboard. It's an example of good design. Now, I am quite familiar, I have to say, much more familiar with startups than most people would realize, because I've never worked in one. I've never worked in a startup. Most people would say I've never worked in a small company. I shouldn't know very much about small companies, but I do, because in the last 5 years, I've probably met with, this is an understatement, probably at least 1,000 entrepreneurs with their own businesses, almost all of them with hardware businesses, so products, physical products, but also physical products that go all the way up to machine learning and lots of other software things. I've learned so much from startups, much more than I ever did from big companies. And now I spend almost all my time with startups, for a lot of reasons I'll explain over the presentation. One of the things I love about good startups is that they're super close to their customer. And they're almost always very hungry, and they're very fast relative to larger companies. They always need money. This is one of the things that makes them so fast. And they're pretty focused on innovating. They often change direction, which is great. And that's part of what good design is all about. Now, I'm going to tell a little bit about our story, some of which you know, but it's not necessarily a story for startups, but there's a lesson in it for everybody. So the company, I asked them to bring this whiteboard. This may or may not work. So if you can't see it, I apologize. And my handwriting, my drawing skills are outstanding, though, as you will see. So when the company was started, how many people have heard of Daniel Darrell? Okay, not enough. In 1981, Daniel Darrell actually and several other a few other Swiss people and a couple of Italians started this company called Logitech. And we started it on the back of this amazing device that was pretty new, which was the personal computer. And it took about a year, but after starting, like many startups, in one direction and moving into another one, we started actually as a software company, and we kind of stumbled around for about a year trying different things, trying to create a spreadsheet program. And we found after about a year, or they found, the mouse. And companies in Silicon Valley especially needed someone to create the mouse, to manufacture mice. So we started out manufacturing mice of course, for the PC. And in about 1987, I'll give you a little history here, 1986, 87, we were still making mice, but we had not yet the Logitech brand had never been used on a mouse. We were selling them to Dell or Sun Microsystems or Apple, and they were putting their name on the product, and they were putting them in the box. And so about 1987, you'll appreciate this if your English isn't it as good as your German or French or Italian or whatever language you primarily speak. About 1987, Daniel Darrell, one of the founders, and Pierluigi Zappacosta, another one, were flying to meet with Dell, which was a relatively new but already big PC maker. They booked their flight to go to Houston, Texas. They landed in Houston. At the time, we didn't have smartphones or GPS because it was 1987, and they immediately pulled out the map with their rent-a-car to drive to Dell's headquarters there in Houston, and they realized that there was no road with in the Houston area where Dell was supposed to be, and they quickly discovered after a phone call to the headquarters that Houston and Austin, Texas, are two different cities. Now they probably sounded the same, but Houston and Austin are very far apart. So they took that rental car and they drove from Houston to Austin, and eventually did see Dell. But in the drive there, they made a big decision, which was to launch the Logitech brand into the retail market. And that was the beginning of what Logitech was. For many years, we continued to make mice for most other people. About 1998, another big thing happened. And we were still growing this way. But in 1998, we made a big decision. And most startups won't get to this decision for maybe at least 5 or 10 years, which is, we decided to enter a new category. Not only were we going to do mice, but we were going to make the brave move of making keyboards. Now, why was that such a tough move? Because as you know, if you have your own startup, you're in a startup, or if you're in a company like Ian and I are, or many of you are, focus is what it's all about. So if you don't focus, you don't get anywhere. But at some point, when you're a company of any size, your primary business starts to run out of steam, and the only way to grow is to get into new things. The reason why it was a tough call to go into the keyboard was because we had a manufacturing plant that made those mice. So we were competitive. We were very good. We never manufactured these, and we didn't actually for many, many years. So it was a big risk. So we put our brand on it. We worked with another company to create it, and before you know it, we were in that category. From that point on, from 1998 till 2008, we had an amazing, and I do mean amazing, run. From 1990, for this 10 years, Guarino De Luca, another Italian who had worked at Apple, came in to run the company at this point, and he led a move not only into keyboards, but also into PC speakers, into webcams, into headsets. So we surrounded the PC, as you know it today, and we even got into gaming products. So we surrounded the PC, and we had this magical formula. And the magical formula, which I've had the good fortune of seeing many times in my career, is this. You have 3 ways to grow. Number 1, you can grow with the platform or the market. So this is the best way to grow. If the market's growing and you're pretty good at what you do, you will grow. And by the way, high growth markets are particularly good for a while anyway. The second way to grow is to innovate and gain market share. This is obvious. The word market share was invented by Nielsen, and now Nielsen is I think a $13 billion business, all built on this idea that market share really matters, because it does. It's the most important way to grow in a way. And the third way to grow is this one, which is to enter the new keyboard space or the new PC speakers or webcams or headsets. So the third one is to enter new markets, adjacencies. 3 ways to grow. Remember that, because if you could find 3 ways to grow in whatever business you're in, over time, don't try to do it up front, it's amazing. Now, as of 1998, something happened. Sorry, 2008. By the way, that 1998, 2008, 10 consecutive years, 39 consecutive quarters of double-digit top line and double-digit bottom line growth. If that doesn't sound impressive to you, I will tell you that no other company, I think, ever in a publicly traded stock exchange has ever done it. So Logitech's the only company that's done it. So 39, almost 40, consecutive quarters of double-digit top line, double-digit bottom line growth. Extraordinary. But all good things tend to come to an end. In 2008, something big happened, which was that PC thing stopped growing. The tablets came out. Steve Jobs had the nerve to put an iPad out there. And when he put that iPad out there, the platform stopped. And unfortunately, we were pretty dependent on that formula. We were a little late to get into things that might be you could probably use with an iPad. In fact, Steve Jobs himself did not believe that a keyboard was even relevant to an iPad. He thought this was all you'd need. And so we then spent the next 4 years trying to find our way. We tried lots of things. We tried full-scale video conferencing systems. We tried to partner with Google in a really cool thing called Google TV, which was a very good idea. Unfortunately, they didn't work, and we weren't very good at trying new things yet. You have to learn that. So we stumbled around for a while, and that's kind of where I came in. So I came in right here. I had the good fortune. Logitech's bad fortune was my good fortune, because that's when they found me, because they were looking for somebody who would at least try something different. And so now I'll talk about what we did. So first of all, I'm gonna set the stage for the results. In my first year on the job, how many people are in their first year on the job? Anybody? A new job? No? Okay. Well, my first year on the job was not good. It was really bad, actually. Our revenues declined. Our profit was at a terrible low, and our stock price, and if you're a publicly traded CEO, this is an important number. Our stock price was between $6 and $7. So you could buy the company. You could have bought the company for about $1 billion. So that was really my starting point. Now, I loved it, because there's nothing better than coming in when you're in trouble. So when I came in, I was looking for the alternative. This was the platform that had grown for years, and I came because I love design, and I wanted to create a design company. Now, what do I mean by design company? A design company to me was a company that would put the user in the middle of things, build products around them, and be able to do that in more and more different categories and places. That's what I wanted. I had run Braun globally in Germany for about 4 years, and I fell in love with design, and I fell in love with the idea of innovating into new categories. So when I came in, I was trying to figure out, what is the new platform? If it's not the PC, and it clearly wasn't, what is it? It's the cloud. Okay, so this was the new platform. It took us a little while to figure that out, but the cloud was our new platform. Why the cloud? Because in the cloud, you had new services, and those services need to be delivered by something. You need to, at the end of the day, we have our 5 senses, and you tend to need to touch and feel and interact with things physically. So the cloud needs physical devices to be able to experience the cloud. So the cloud was the new platform. So not take the PC, put it on the side, replace it with a cloud. The cool thing about the cloud is there are a lot of clouds, as you're going to see. So the cloud was our new platform. Now, inside any of these platforms, we could obviously do what we'd done back with the mouse, which is to gain market share. If we innovate well, if you innovate very well, and you're competitive, and you're good, and you're in the right market, you can tend to gain market share. And finally, the coolest thing about this story is that there are lots of clouds. So not only are there lots of products within the cloud, lots of products within it. So let's take music. inside the music space, and I'll define music for you. Music is any device that you listen to or experience music with. Okay, I'll just name a few categories. Bluetooth speakers, Wi-Fi in-home speakers, car stereos, earphones, headphones. There's lots of devices, okay? So those are all potentially different categories that a company like us could enter. So imagine the PC. We had all those categories we could go into. Now you're in the music space with this cloud of music streaming down on you from somewhere. And now you've got lots of different ways to experience it. So we have lots of new markets within music that we could enter. But it's not just music. So unlike the old era where we had just the PC, we're not constrained only to music. Let's go to the fourth one. This one is going to seem really strange. Gaming. Now, you mentioned that you like our headsets, and gaming most of our business in gaming is PC gaming. So you could say, well, you're back to the PC again. But not really. Because PC gaming has completely changed over the last decade. PC gaming is not really PC gaming. It's cloud-based gaming. What's happening is you're playing with people. If you play League of Legends or Overwatch or any game that's a cloud-based PC game, which is the only games people play anymore, you're basically playing on servers throughout the world. They're updated real time all the time. There can be hundreds of thousands of people on them at the same time, and they're almost free because once you have that much scale operating in that many different places, the cost drops to near zero. So as a result, this is another cloud-based business. So suddenly the old mouse and keyboard and headset business, when you put it in gaming, is a cloud-based business again, and it's growing again. Now, what about these others? Video conferencing. Video conferencing used to be a business where you'd walk into a room, and still is, by the way. You walk into a room, and somewhere in that room that you can't see, there's a PC. It's kind of a big PC, but it's a PC. It's a server. And that server's hidden in the wall, and it's enabling you to communicate point to point to another room somewhere that has a server that's probably by the same company, and you're able to communicate back and forth visually and very, very effectively using that. Now, that's really changed too because of the cloud. So the cloud basically takes that server, puts it up into a series of servers around the world that are shared, super low cost. Now you don't need a PC in the room at all. What do you need? You need a camera. You need a microphone. You need some way of hearing it, so speakers. And so that's our kind of business. So we've entered that business too. So another cloud-based, and that could go on and on. There's so many different opportunities here. So the bottom line is, a company like Logitech, if we're innovative, if we think as a design-led, consumer-centered, customer-centered business, we have an almost unlimited number of opportunities. And I'll stop for a second and just say, let me illustrate how many opportunities we have. This room's a little tricky, but I would say absolutely everything in this room, every single thing in this room, including the walls, the lights, the chairs, you, me, our clothes, will be connected over the next 20 or 30 years. Why? Because the cost of storage, the cost of computing power, the cost of sensors, thanks to companies like Apple, the cost of all that is going to be approaching free, and the cost of cloud storage, so cloud computing. So if the cost is approaching free, then there's not a single product in the world that shouldn't be thought of as including those three or four free ingredients, and most of them will. Now, very few. These chairs do not take advantage of any of those ingredients, and one day they will. So there's an opportunity across an infinite number of categories to reinvent the category now, and that's exactly how we think about it. Now, for us to play in it, and this is pretty downstream thought for most startups, for us to play in these new spaces, we need some advantage. Why Logitech? Can't be just design. Design will get you so far. Well, this is the incredibly fancy way we think about what we are and how we can bring advantage. So we essentially have 5 key capabilities, and we're soon to add a 6th, that we're building all the time. The first one is our operations, which is the old manufacturing plant that I showed you in the beginning, or talked about in the beginning. So we manufacture and we bring those things to market. We're very efficient. We do our own manufacturing. I don't encourage any startup to do that. But in our case, we've been doing it for so long that it's really a big advantage. The second one is design. I've already talked about that. I personally, this is a personal opinion. I wouldn't get into any business without really thinking of it as a design business, because if you don't, somebody else will. And design is basically about rapid iteration and rapid prototyping and continually keeping your user close to you and always, always innovating to improve the experience. When we launched that product I put up there first, 3 months before it was on the market, we already hated it because we knew so many things we could do better and different. And that's the mentality that design gives you. I love it. I don't really hate it. You won't either. The third one's engineering. We're an engineering company. Logitech really started as an engineering company, will always be an engineering company, but we're a different kind of engineering company. We started as a hardware engineering company, and we're really good at sensors. We're really good at mechanical engineering and electrical engineering and battery management, but we've also had to become much better at software. And now we're starting to get better at machine learning and artificial intelligence. And you've got to keep growing, and we're going to keep growing in this engineering space. Go-to-market is a big problem for startups in hardware. They all, if a great hardware company, a great hardware startup can, I could take 5 people from this room, because this is a room full of smart people. I could take any 4 of you, and the 5 of us could go away for a few months, and we could develop a product in almost any category we could think of, and I'll bet you we could make one that's better, or at least different and more appealing to somebody in the market. And so we could bring it to market. And in the beginning, we could be successful. And we might even get good reviews from TechCrunch and other NZZ. We might even get a good review or 2 in the process, maybe very strong reviews. And then we would launch that product. And then if we launched in the wrong category, we might, kind of poke the dragon, and a big company would decide, wow, that's a good idea. We need to be doing that. And then they'd come out at match, and then we'd have to be on the 2nd generation of product. So we'd be just obsessed with creating a great product. Meanwhile, 3 years later, if we were really successful, we won that battle, we would find ourselves completely in, let's say we started in Silicon Valley, a US-based company. Well, the advantage we have, and the reason why we're still around, and I think we have a promising future, one of the reasons is that we could take the same product, and in 2 weeks, we could launch it in almost every market in the world because we're super global. That's the benefit of being around for a while. The last one is marketing. I'd say it's the thing we're the weakest at. We're not a particularly good marketing company yet. We're still learning that. I spent my career at Procter & Gamble and Brown and Whirlpool and a few other places. And I think we've got a lot to learn, but the good thing is that we don't have to learn the same things that everybody learned before because marketing's changed. I hated marketing up until maybe 5 or 6 years ago because I felt marketing had become sort of claiming things and describing things a little bit more exaggerated than they are. And that disturbed me, so I got rid of my whole marketing function when I came to the company. But over the last few years, I've changed my view of that again. And I think, as long as you're truthful and it's authentic and it's real, marketing can be incredibly powerful. In the past, a company could control their marketing. So when I started my career, you could control what people thought about you because you could describe what brand you were. You then could place your advertising in a magazine or buy advertising on TV or control a message you gave to a journalist. And your message was your message. And I think that was a terrible thing because it wound up creating a war for words and claims and exaggeration. The wonderful thing now is because of social media, because of the ubiquity of communication and how impossible it is to control a customer or a competitor or even somebody who's just interested, everybody can talk about you all the time. So if you don't have authenticity as a brand, you've got nothing, absolutely nothing. You're so fragile, a 5 kilometer an hour wind can blow you away. So that's the kind of marketing I love because it's a torture test, it's real. So those are the 5 things we're really working on. Now, let me talk a little bit about design. I mentioned that when I came to the company, I wanted to be a design company. I wanted us to be a design company. That's not just about beautiful products, as I pointed out. I hope our products are beautiful. It's really about design thinking, constantly iterating. And this isn't something that, I say it as if, we're the first company that thought about it. We aren't, of course. And as I mentioned, every single person in every job in every company can do it. When we're done, or when I'm done one of these days, unless they throw me out before, we will be designing our accounting, the way we close our books at the end of every quarter, the way we have our meetings, everything. And I don't mean designing so that it's beautiful or perfect. I mean designing so that the user is getting a better and better experience, or so that the experience is moving because the world's moving and the technology available is moving. So design is really what, in my opinion, absolutely central to our success, short and long term. And so we're always trying to figure out how to make our design better. When I came, we didn't have a single designer in the company, not a one. And so I spent my first year doing nothing. I'm not a designer, but and you're not either. Many of you are not either. But you can do design, because design is just sitting there and listening very carefully to customers, internal customers or external customers, and trying to really understand what they want, and then rapidly trying to prototype something, put it together so that you can put it in front of somebody and get feedback. Well, the more sophisticated version of that is to actually have the luxury of your own design team. So after that first year, I found my way to somebody who's now become a friend of mine and a partner. And that partner is, let me go back a slide there. That partner is now the former head of design for Nokia. He and I created some design principles, and now we've built a design team made up of people from Nike and IDEO and Microsoft and other companies that have done a lot with design. And we've put those people around the world. So we now have designers around the world, all kinds of design disciplines I didn't even know existed, like business model design. But we've got industrial design and UI, UX and things. So now we've really got design, and we've got design built out around the world. And I would say we are legitimately becoming, we're not there yet, we're becoming a design company. Now, there are several things that give me confidence that it's working. Okay, this is one of them. You know, design awards are just awards. You know, they're not business results, so you can't over-celebrate awards. But we've won a lot of design awards. We've won over 100 design awards from very prestigious design organizations in the last 3 years. And I think that's more design awards per revenue dollar than any company, I believe, if it's above a certain size. So we've certainly got, from an award standpoint, we're getting some credit. Now, let me go back up here and say, how have the results been financially? Now, you probably can't read this, so I'll put something up in a minute that makes it easier to read. After that first terrible year, that if you're in your first year, even your second year, my second year wasn't very good either. My second year, we grew 2%. So it wasn't exactly an amazing year. You know, if you claim that you're going to be a design or growth company, that's not great. But then the next year was 4%, and the next year was 9%, and the next year, which was last year, was 15%. So by our last year, which is our fiscal year 17, we grew 15%. Well, not bad. We quadrupled our profits. So we went to over $250 million. So from 67. That's not quadrupled for you finance people in the room. That's somewhere between 3x and 4x. Our stock price is now at $35. So our stock price has gone up by, a lot, 500 or 600%. And the cool thing about that is that we're just getting started. We're at the very beginning of what we're going to do. Now, so this captures a little bit of that in a way that you can see from the back of the room. You know, as you see, our growth has gone up, our profit's gone up, and our stock price has gone up. So people have a tendency to look at that and say, "Ooh, you must have joined the right markets, you must have done the right thing," and they're true. But at the end of the day, I believe it's because we're a design company, becoming a design company. If you pulled the companies that I would define as design companies out, and you look at their stock performance over the last decade, companies like Nike, I think you'd see very similar trends. There's not a constant straight line up, but over time, if you look over time, when the rubber meets the road and you look at them relative to their alternatives, they're almost always outgrowing the markets they're in. You can't afford not to be in design. Now, as I said, we're at the very beginning of what we're going to do, so I'm going to come back and talk about startups here at the end, but we're at the very beginning of what we're going to do. Why do I say that? Well, because in that little house with the capabilities in it that I showed, at the top of the house, you might have noticed, I said multi-brand, multi-category company. So we're going to be a multi-brand, multi-category design company. That's our mission. Everybody's got a different mission. That's our company mission. And that means we have a lot of spaces to go into new things. And so we're going to keep going into new things over time. Now, I'm going to close on just a couple of things. The first one I want to talk about is, and many of you work in big companies, so you'll probably be able to relate to this. I want to talk about working in a big company. And I want to tell you that I spent my career in big companies. I've never worked in a small company until now. And so I'm not an authority on small companies. I am an authority on big companies, though. At least I think I am. And I will tell you, I don't think big companies do very many things well. You know, ironically, we have a tendency to celebrate big company best practices. Why? Well, because they're big. And so we look at the best practices and the good performance, and there are so many good big companies out there, they probably wouldn't be surviving if they weren't good. But those most of those best practices are actually needed because these companies are big. They're big, they're slow, they're bureaucratic, they're over-layered and over-leveled, and therefore they have to do things differently from a good small company. And so which is better? A good small company, every time. A good small, 5 people working together well is better, much, much better than any big company could ever be. So if that's the case, then what do you do? Because it's like a paradox. You know, you're working as a small company, but you're trying to get big. So I mean, let's face it, that's the ultimate mission, is to grow and scale. And you know, if you work in startups long enough, or you hang around startups, the word scale comes up, you know, 10 times a day. You know, they throw out the old founder, or they make them step aside, and they bring in the expert from P&G or Coke or Unilever or somebody, or Nestle, and they say, you know, we want you to run the company because you're good at scaling. And so the new person comes in, and they bring in those best practices from the big company. And it often doesn't work. Sometimes it does, but it often doesn't work. Why? Why doesn't it work? I mean, it should work. It doesn't work because those aren't best practices for a small company. And they're not better than being small, being good and small. So it's a paradox. This is one of the tough things I think that people don't talk about much, and I obviously have a very strong opinion about it. Now, I'm not criticizing the successful big companies. There's so many amazing companies in the world today, from Apple to Google to, I mean, you know, how could we possibly not say they're good? Of course they're good. I'm just saying they have a big problem, which is that they're big. And you don't have it if you're a small company. So don't get it. Don't get that disease. Now, how do you avoid the disease? I don't know. I'll admit that I don't know. I think design is part of the answer, but I don't really know. I don't think design and just bring in designers is going to solve that problem. I think we're going to have to redesign the way we think about companies. I think companies are going to have to figure out how to act more like a collection of small companies rather than a big company. Now, that won't work in every industry, won't work for every company. I hope it'll work for us, because we're going to try to do it. But that's really our future. So I will say one last thing to the entrepreneurs in the audience, which is it's hard to be an entrepreneur. You know, it's exciting, but it's hard. And I have, as I said, I'm not one, but I've spent so much time with you, and I love entrepreneurs, and I've learned more from entrepreneurs and good founders in the last several years than I did probably in 20 of the 30 years of my career. And I think it's a tremendous place to learn. What we're trying to do is be a company where entrepreneurs can come for refuge. So if you're an entrepreneur, and here's a common path for an entrepreneur. You start out friends and family money. You might have somehow you got enough money to get started. You've got 2 or 3 people who you love to work with, and you guys are passionate about an idea, and you get it off the ground. And then you get it to a point where you kind of need more money, and so you raise a little more money. This time, you aren't to the point where you're making money yet, but you're getting there. So you raise some money, you bring it in, you give up a little ownership, but you need to because you're going to get bigger. And so you then you're kind of off, and you're moving ahead, and so far so good. Now, this is where the stories diverge. You know, some companies end up in a constant battle to raise money. The founder moves from being, like Ian is a CTO, he probably loves technology and loves what he's doing. I love products, so I don't want to spend all my time raising money. But a lot of founders find themselves every month, every week almost, maybe 50% of their time ends up being the fundraising business. And it's really frustrating because they got into it because they were in love with an idea of bringing something to a user, and they find themselves a financier and a banker. There's some people who love that, but many of them don't. So it is a tough thing. It's a tough story for many people. There's another path, which is, and I'm advocating this path very publicly, make a little, sell a little. Make a little, sell a little. Don't try to scale too fast. The world will push you to scale as fast as humanly possible. Venture capital is built on this. They don't mind if you hit the wall, like insects against a windshield. And a few of you don't, because then they don't invest in you. They invest in the ones that don't. So it's a dog-eat-dog world. But I believe that most startups would be better off if they slow down, they scale more slowly, they try to make a little, sell a little, like the guy who started the pizza place down the street instead of Uber. So that's my closing message. I am not an expert in startups. I do love design. I encourage you, if you're in a startup, you're in a big company, think of yourself as a designer, because one day you should be, and you can be. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have time for just a few questions.
Perfect.
Just a few questions. Well, before we do, I just want to point out, though, that this is actually the official Digital Festival clicker, and this is actually a Logitech device. So I just wanted to clarify before we go.
Good news.
So who actually has a Logitech mouse? Okay, good.
Not enough.
Not enough, yeah. So we'll be selling some in the back for those of you who don't have them. No, but I want to open the round to questions. So hold on, can I get the question cube? The blue one, yeah.
Oh, I love these.
Yeah, these are cool too.
We should get in that business too.
You should. But they're a lot. If you make them softer, by the way, because I threw this in the audience yesterday, and it's not as soft as I thought.
Can we just throw it to somebody and they have to ask a question?
That is the strategy I like.
Not bad.
I may be one of the entrepreneurs you have talked to, and I had always this idea that Logitech would be perfect in order to bring Alexa kind of device to the market. And it would be especially fun if we could understand Swiss German, because basically you are guys a Swiss company, even if the CEO is not. So have you any plans for that?
Well, you know, we work on a lot of products we don't talk about, so I won't be talking about products that I'm not talking about. But we're always working on new stuff, and we're super excited. We are working with a lot of the large companies. Like we think of ourselves as a small company, and we think of ourselves as a harmless, capable partner for a lot of the larger companies like Amazon, like Apple, Google. You know, that's really our place in the world, and as you said, there are opportunities everywhere, including in the personal assistant space. So we'll see.
Yeah, perfect.
Other questions?
We have time for another two questions. Yeah, please, in the front. The cube. There you go. Yep. Oh, perfect.
Hi, about branding. Logitech is such a great brand. Why do you use other brands like UE?
Yeah, thank you for saying that about Logitech. Logitech is a great brand. I'm trying to think of an analogy so I can bring this home. I want to think of an analogy without insulting another company. I'll use our company. I'll insult us. So when I first came to Logitech, we have amazing, and I mean amazing technology in Bluetooth speakers and in acoustics and far-field microphones, to your question. So we have great engineering. And so we launched a series of products, like within the first 6 months I was there, just to show you that it wasn't all straight uphill. And they failed miserably. And they were under Logitech UE. They were basically Logitech. Now, was there something wrong with the products? No. Was there something wrong with our go-to-market? No. Did we overprice them? Was there tough competition? There was definitely tough competition. And I'm convinced that the reason that we weren't successful is because we were competing with Bose and Beats. We were competing with brands and companies that grew up authentically thinking about nothing but music product. And consumers know that. You know that. I know that. I know the CEO of Bose. I know that's all they've ever done. So when we brought Logitech in to create a product, and if we had tried to take Logitech into the market, with the risk we have, even though the people who worked on it were 100% music focused. We have an entire building of people who do nothing but design and simulate music products. But when we went to market as Logitech, as good as the Logitech brand is in many spaces, people would have said, oh, Logitech's a good brand. I can understand why they'd be stretching into music, but they're not Bose. So what would have happened? We would have been priced below Bose. We would have had half the market share. And the results have been completely different. We're the market leader here in Switzerland with a brand that nobody's ever heard of called Ultimate Ears, because people know, well, maybe that's an authentic music brand, and it is. It was born on stage by performers like Justin Timberlake putting it in their ear, and we took the same acoustic technology, and the music experts inside of the Ultimate Ears business have built products, and one of them is the Bluetooth speaker. So that's why. There are categories where you need a dedicated brand. You can't compete head-to-head if you're not authentically in that category. Not everywhere. So, Martin, we will very stubbornly add brands, and they have to be authentic. It's not just painting a new logo on there. Okay, one more?
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're out of time here, but we do have something for you here. Hold on.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah, of course. So, hold on. Here we go. So, we're all about competitor analysis also, right? So we got your Sennheiser headset just to test out to see.
Wow, that's terrific. Thank you.
Competitor, it's very good to get
Great
out
company.
there. And then, obviously, the color to go with that as well. So, that's a great way to carry that discreetly back to the office.
Yeah, I'll have to hide it because they won't let me in.
Yeah, definitely. That's why we got you the bag. It's like Friday. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Cool.
Well,
thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please,
Thank you.
a round of applause. Perfect. All right, can you guys step up? Perfect. So, can you just help me move the table off stage? Perfect. Thank you. Folks, that was a great start to this morning. Next, we're going to talk about a company whose products we touch all the time, in the sense that they touch almost everything that we do. And I'm really excited to actually introduce the CTO on this company to you guys today, because it's one of those things that it's omnipresent, but it's kind of in the background. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about Bühler, and I'm really excited to announce the CTO of Bühler, Ian. Please come up here. Big round of applause, guys. Here you go. Thank you.
Goodness gracious. So, good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here, and it's always a delight to walk on stage inspired by the previous speaker, isn't it? So, it's quite a tough act to follow. So we're going to take a trip across the Atlantic. It's going to be the other English now. So it's British English, so retune. And I'm going to talk to you about a completely different company in the journey that we're on. So it's a traditional company, 157 years old, that makes machines. So what are we doing here at a digital festival? And the conundrum that every big company faces now with traditional industry is what's in digital for us, but more importantly, what's in it for our customers, and how is this creating a new competitive set for us? So I'm going to go through a little bit the journey we're on and tell you what we're doing. Doesn't mean it's right. It may not all be wrong, but I hope it's interesting. Now, the first thing I have a disadvantage versus Logitech is none of you have a clue what we do, right? We're a local company just down the road, but you don't know what we do. So to give you a little bit of a feeling and build on what Lucas said, in the morning, if your phone wakes you up, the color filters on the touch screen were ground on our technology. The camera, the optical films were coated on our technology. The electrical parts were ground on our technology. If you're hungry and you have breakfast and you have a cereal that doesn't look as it did in the field, okay? If it's round or flaked or popped, it's gone through our technology. conditioning, extrusion, drying. Every morning I like to look the best for my team. So when I put my lipstick on, my bright red lipstick, I'm always proud and reassured that the inks and the colorants are ground on Bühler lines, as well as high security inks, as well as the material in the chairs. If it has a colorant, it's probably come off our technology. If you have a pet, it's nice to feed the pet before you leave the house. Dry pet food, very similar to breakfast cereals, never to be confused. Technology route is pretty much the same. In the morning, coffee, ground, roasted, conveyed on Bühler technology. You get to lunchtime, more than half of the world's wheat is turned into flour on Bühler technology. It's stored post-harvest. It's cleaned, it's graded, it's sorted. The ship loaders in the ports, the ship unloaders in the ports, the storage, the flour mills, the pasta plants, the snacks. For those of you that read the press this week, now the biscuits. We made for us, a major acquisition we announced earlier this week. So that value chain coverage is extraordinary. 30% of the world's rice, exactly the same. About the same in terms of corn and maize. So technology that is used to produce these products, not producing the products ourselves, okay? We don't process wheat. We provide the technology to process wheat, the mills. After lunch, you want a chocolate factory? You buy bricks and a packaging machine. Everything else comes from us. 2/3 of the world's chocolate comes off. Okay, so extraordinary, extraordinary company. Pasta, we talked about cars. Aluminium, magnesium engine blocks come off Bühler die casting lines. As we go to autonomous driving, the sensors, the optics are coated on our technology. We're the only company in the world that has continuous lithium-ion battery production capability in industry running today. This makes us kind of popular. And at the end of the day, if you've avoided our products, 3 out of 4 beers come off a malting plant from us. Okay? So it's an extraordinary penetration into society for a company that you've absolutely never heard of. Now, it's a 157-year-old company, 2.5 billion turnover, from a little village called Uzwil. The family is still there. We're still 100% family-owned, 5th generation of the family. But it's a truly global company, serving the world's biggest companies. What's nice about a family company? The time scale. Families think for the next generation. Every decision we take is on behalf of our children and our grandchildren. The sustainability targets of a family company are what a family does. They're the values that you want to raise your family by. On the other hand, we have a fully professional board with full transparency on financial reporting, all the compliance issues, sustainability issues. So it's a perfect combination. And when you're the CTO, the family sets one rule that I love. We will be the technology leaders. We'll invest 5% of turnover into innovation. CTO makes me very happy. Then this happened, okay? One of the promises I made when I moved to Bühler 6 years ago is disruptive technology would be in our hands. Now, you've seen the breadth of the portfolio, so it was a dumb promise to make, and I hadn't quite foreseen how important digital would be. So this was a major disruption for us, and we see this so-called 4th industrial revolution. The question we asked ourselves is, why? My objective is not to be digital. My objective is to use digital to solve major problems. What is the purpose? And what is our role that we play in the world that digital will enable us to do faster, more efficiently, more effectively, and with greater impact? That's the game we play. I don't need more apps. I need more impact. So we said, how do we tackle this? We'll do it like we always do. We invited our customers to come to Uzwil. 600 customers came to Uzwil. I mean, that itself is incredible, isn't it? I mean, the center of the universe up the road. So 600 customers came. Now, to give you a feeling of scale, those 600 people in that room feed 4 billion people a day. Okay? More than half the world's population. That's scale. That's leverage. We brought them together and we said, the issues on nutrition, the obesity, the malnutrition, food scarcity, availability, 800 million people going to bed, or not going to bed, 800 million starving. We talk about food safety. and the outbreaks. We talk about sustainability. We talk about climate change. And then we talked about the role of digital to enable us as an industry to tackle these problems. And we went into breakout groups. We made strategic decisions. We made agreements. And we centered these agreements around basically, let's see if this works, one slide with one message. This was for the food side. We said 24% of the world's greenhouse gases are generated through agriculture. 69% of the world's water is used in agriculture. 1/3 of the world's energy goes into food production, and 1/3 of the world's food is lost or wasted. 8% of greenhouse gases to create waste. 23% of the world's water to create waste. 10% of the world's energy utilization to create waste. How on earth does that make sense? How does it make sense? And that's the same in every country. We're all complicit. So we said, what's our target? We're going to reduce, with our customers, energy consumption and waste by 30% in our customers' value chains. We have to do it in our manufacturing. But if I make a machine with 30% less energy, or I make a machine that consumes 30% less energy 24/7, 365 days of the year for 25 years, that is a different impact. And there you have a genuine impact on climate change. So that's what we decided to do. Easier said than done, I promise you. But we agreed we would do it. So the first thing we said is, you don't do this alone. Not only is this massive collaboration with customers important, you have to dig into the deep knowledge, the extraordinary capabilities of your supply chain, and you have to work as partners with your suppliers. You have to build your academic networks. You have to tap into the knowledge outside your company. No company is big enough or stupid enough to imagine they can tackle this alone. So we founded the World Food Systems Center. This is nearly 10 years ago we took this decision. 35 professors working on food value chain resilience. We founded the same thing in the EPFL. And in fact, I was going to ask Bracken, does he know how much he helped me? Because when I wanted to build an office on EPFL for our traditional company, where we are very Swiss German, I mean, I could have asked them, could we put an office on Mars? So I took the executive board down to Lausanne, and it's cool, and this is phenomenal entrepreneurial campus, etc. And they met some professors, and they weren't convinced, so I took them into Logitech, and the Logitech showed them what they do on campus. And our guys walked out, and they said, Ian, for God's sake, put an office here. It's such a cool campus, we have to be in this ecosystem. So I owe him a word of thanks. We've just joined the Swiss Data Science Initiative. We're the first partner for that. This gives us access to data scientists and analytics. We decided to fundamentally change the culture of our company for innovation. We do bottom-up innovation. Half our employees engage in this. And at Interpack, the biggest machine show in Europe this year, the 3 biggest innovations we presented that blew our customers away came from this bottom-up competition. But then we realized you do this cool stuff inside your company, and they have an idea, and then boom, you get stuck. You're in a traditional R&D process, and it's like walking through quicksand. So we said, what do we do with these guys? So we went to the US, we went to Boston, we met some guys called Mass Challenge, world's biggest startup accelerator. 128 startups for 4 months in one space in Boston. The whole ecosystem comes in and helps them and accelerates them. 12 months for startups' life in 4 months. They take no equity, there is no obligation of the startups, it's an NGO. We loved it. We put a team in, and they flew. They created a first business model, first service, commercialized it, and executed it in 4 months. We sell machines. They sold a service in 4 months. So we said, this is so cool. So I called a few of my friends when we came back, because corporates can be quick. I called Nestlé, very fast company, you all know. Givaudan, Barry Callebaut, Gaia, Swiss Economic Forum, and Artist Foundation. We met in a bar. We had a glass of wine, and we said, should we bring these guys in? If we took 20% of the American can-do attitude, if we took 20% of their ambition, their energy, their acceptance of risk, and we married this to the robust engineering skills in Europe and tried to cancel out our terrible fear of failure, and we brought this together into Switzerland, what could we do? What would you unlock in economic growth, in employment, in opportunities for young people and old people? It's pretty cool. So we had a glass of wine, we agreed we'd do it. 2 weeks later, we announced it in the national press. Not popularly greeted in all areas. Then, 6 weeks later, we did a kickoff in Geneva. 550 people turned up, we had 300 chairs. 6 weeks after that, we had 450 startups that applied from around the world. 2 months later, we had 70 startups starting a 4-month program in the accelerator in Lausanne. They got 14 million of funding during the period, just during the 4 months. 6 of them founded in Switzerland. They sold 30 contracts. We've now got 75 down there this year. It's a cool program. We learn the culture of innovation and startups. We coach startups, we support them. We learn more than they get, I'm sure, but they are also successful. So that's cool. The problem we have is, and this is also why the startup world is very important, is the fundamental issue around digital has nothing to do with technology. Nada. I mean, if I just take the people in this room, we'll solve every technological problem that we come across. We might not do it in the most cost-effective way, but we will do it and we will learn. Problem is, how do you go to market in a fundamental change of your traditional business model? You go from capital goods to selling services. It's a very easy transaction if I sell you 2 tons of metal that processes food for you or battery slurries for the next 10 years. You give me money, it all seems quite fair and easy. If I come to you and say, I'm selling you the capability to do something, it's not very tangible anymore. So you have to change your business model. You need these accelerators, incubators in which to develop new business models as well for your corporates and your corporate teams. Then you have this whole thing about speed. If I put a machine into a market that doesn't work, that's a team of 20 people for 5 years fixing it in the market, and that's my brand trashed. Very expensive. Software doesn't matter. You need to be fast. You develop it with your customers. You develop it in partnership. It's a completely different model, and you have to have this ambidextrous leadership skills within a company to manage this. Physical, virtual, I mentioned. Scale is completely different in the online world than we have in the physical goods world. We have to test fast and we have to collaborate. So it's a whole new learning. If we hadn't gone through this learning within our company of collaboration and broken silos, we would never be able to attack the digital challenge effectively. So we look at what our values are and what do we bring. We have 150 years of processing experience and knowledge. We build up data analytics capability. We understand the quality parameters that make our customers more successful on their lines. It's not just about does the machine work, it's does the machine enable the customer to deliver the quality that allows them to be more successful as businessmen. And we have something else. If you look at the world, we have over 100 service stations around the world. Because one of the things we learned, we built this digital interface in our internal innovation competition. It's now the single digital interface for our company, onboarding more than 200 customers every single month to move all their transactions to us on spare parts, wear parts, basic service requirements into an e-commerce relationship. But so what if you can't deliver the physical goods? I mean, would Amazon work if I clicked, took me 2 minutes to order something, maybe 10 seconds to order something, and then I waited 5 months for it? So you cannot run this kind of thing as a software company. You have to have the physical partnership to deliver the physical good. And this network is very valuable, and that combination is, we believe, is what makes us strong. Now, like all good companies, we kind of built a strategy. I'll show you this one slide, and then we won't talk about strategies anymore. And we said, look, it's clear we need basic sensors. We need useful data. Not just any data. We need useful data. We need robust data, data we can rely on, because our customers will take major decisions based on this information. We need a standardized automation pyramid. If we don't have standardized automation, how on earth do we scale anything across all our businesses? That's an internal dilemma. We fix that. We move into the Internet of Things. We need standard data collection, standard gateways, connectors. We need to have a standard platform to put services on that our customers can interface to. We need to build up data analytics competence. We didn't desperately need data scientists previously when we built machines. This is a new competence that we build up in the company, and we have to crack the business models. And when I talk about sensors, this isn't does the machine shake? Is the drive getting hot? Is the motor switched on? That's standard. You have that in basic automation systems. Is the product quality good? Is the product safe? Does it contain high levels of mycotoxins before it gets into the food system? These are the questions you have to ask. The big ones, and you have to understand the product quality. Now, this machine up here at the top is a sorting machine. So we've been making these for 20, 30 years now. What do? 300,000 grains of rice per second. Okay? Think about it, it's a lot of rice. Imaged on 360 degrees of the surface. The visual images analyzed and the defective grains ejected 30 centimeters later. Okay? That's what we call optical sorting. That's the kind of data access we have. And these machines, for the last 10 years, 13 years I think it is, have remote access on them. And we service them remotely, and we set them up remotely, and we have this data. So it's not, we thought we knew nothing about digital. We made a few discoveries that actually some of the stuff we did was quite good. It was a bit of a shock for us. So we decided that we could legitimately rebrand ourselves as a company doing a little bit in the IoT digital space. The others are around optimization of process. So we have a big partnership with Bosch. Bosch makes a few more MEMS sensors than we do. So we thought we'd tap into their knowledge and we'd partner with them rather than try and reinvent something that obviously someone else does much better. We built a global partnership with a small software company. I'm not here to advertise Microsoft. Whoever you choose, you're going to have problems. But the global companies at least give us an opportunity to standardize around the world. So there's no right or wrong in this. There's just be committed and do it. I don't see any other way around it. I don't think there's a good choice or a bad choice, but there is definitely a bad form of execution. So we're doing quite well. We've built that up. We built up our data analytics. I gave the nod to Logitech earlier for helping us. Because we had an office on the campus in EPFL, we could hire data scientists. Because, you know, data scientists generally is looking at the big word beginning with G, the Google word if they want a job. They're not necessarily going, do you know, I'll look for a company that makes machines for the food industry. That's where I want my career. But if you can have the data scientists on campus, they can still buy the same coffee, they can still live their student life, but they come to work every day. We found it's very attractive. So that works very well for us. In addition, we have a lot of partners supporting us, and we're building up capabilities. And as I say, we're the first partner of the Swiss Data Science Center. Now, 13 years ago, with all these optical sorters, we could support setup, we could troubleshoot, we could tell them which parts we're going to wear, when did they have to change them. Now, we can make really pretty dashboards as well. So we can do all the same stuff in a cooler way, it's more accessible, and of course behind it we have the data to do analysis, to do benchmarking, and to create services. And of course this is what we do for our customers, is to support them, because the product quality helps them in their procurement decisions, and it helps them in their selling decisions, and it helps them optimize their processing and fit their process parameters to the quality of product that they've procured. Every mill now, as a mill owner, you can have it on your iPad, whatever your chosen tablet is, and you can see it, but you can see what's working. You can see what needs changing. You can see what the maintenance guys need to look at next. We can run the analytics to tell them how to optimize so that they can get that 1% more profit, which makes a big difference in a low-profit industry. And we can help them benchmark and adopt best practices. This helps us grow our core business, and it's a service to our customers. Our mission as a company is to engineer customer success. It's not an altruistic mission. Successful customers buy more. So we've got customers that have been our customers for 4 generations of their families. That's about engineering customer success. We create different things as well. This is nice. This is a box. Has a presentation tray. You put rice in the tray. We have a very nice smartphone app that does a quality analysis on the rice. So if you're buying rice as a trader, you aren't able, everywhere that you need to buy rice, to do an analysis. This we can do, send it up, we give you an analysis, we give you the results back, and we tell you should you buy, should you not buy, and what is the quality analysis. So now we start selling these. These are almost consumer products. We're a machine builder. So it's a hell of a journey. I told you about what we did in the US. We took this cool team of ours who came up with an idea, and we sent them to Mass Challenge, and we put them there for 4 months and said, you're on your own, but form a business. They wanted to do food safety validation. Now, what you don't do as any responsible company is guarantee anything in the US. It's the most litigious marketplace on earth. The risk is appalling. So we said, yeah, all right, go to America, find out how to do it. They went in 4 months in an accelerator. I mean, this is incredible. First of all, for a corporate team, the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks are learning not to be corporate. It's a very tough induction into an accelerator world and startup world. So they do that. Then they got some kids from the local university to get all the microbiological kill data. They found some guys in the accelerator who helped them with a bit of software programming and built up the first prototype. They built a sensor package. Our local business helped them a bit with customers. Their advisors were all non-Bühler. They just went into the ecosystem. They helped each other out. The lawyers came in and they built the contracts and they built the promise such that they were safe in the US. Within 4 months, they went to customer. They launched a subscription business model on food safety validation. FDA admissible data. That means if something goes wrong on your line, you've got the data to not go to prison as a factory manager. And we found, we were talking about food safety, we realized that keeping people out of prison was quite a compelling sell. So that's what we did. It didn't work at all, all right? I have to tell you, it sounds brilliant, doesn't it? But it absolutely didn't work in the first 4 months. It took us 12 months to make a more robust product, but now it's a standard sale, and we sell these around the world. It's a very cool way of building a new business model. And it's not just on the cool new stuff, because your core business can be supported as well by digital. So if we look at what we do, chocolate making, I told you, all the chocolate you eat's probably touched the Bühler technology. When you make chocolate, at least for Switzerland, first of all, you refine it, you get it under 100 microns. This would be inedible, okay? It would be like eating sand. You then put it into a 5-roll refiner, you take it down here to about 20 micron, 35 microns you can feel on your palate if you're sensitive, all right? 20 microns, it's creamy, it's smooth, it's good Swiss chocolate. Then you mix it in a conch and you mix it to take off all the acid volatile flavors that you don't like in your chocolate, and you create that caramelic note that you do like, and you liquefy it, and then you go and make chocolate bars with it. We've automated this. So we can get a feedback from any of these machines to reset what comes out of the previous one, and a feed forward to reset the conditions in the next one to guarantee constant quality. And this is through quality measurement, this is through efficiency measurement, and this, of course, is through some quite smart analytics to run this. So that helps our core business grow, it helps our customers be more successful. Maybe the last example, which is really an unusual one. So this traditional metal building company builds analytics for social media. Obvious, isn't it? You're probably going, geez, they've gone mad. They got carried away. No, it is obvious. Do you know why? Because when a government issues a food safety alert, I can pick it up on social media weeks before. I can go to my customers and say, hey, there's problems. Check all your supply chains. Check your processes. We can give them a heads up. We can support them to be sure that they are successful in their business. This is really cool. This doesn't, I mean, if you go to a Nestle, they can do all this in their sleep, but most of our companies cannot do this. So it's a fantastic service that we offer them. And it's relevant to our business, but our customers really appreciate it. And this is about building their success. Very focused on that. So where are we on our digital journey? I think we woke up, and I tell you, we made a mistake. We lit a fire under our organization. We're a company that experiments. And I'm kind of like the chief experimenter. I'm paid to fail. So it's quite good fun. So we lit a fire under the organization. We built this central platform. We got all the business areas, and we said, guys, you're going to build services, IoT-enabled services. And they all looked at us and went, yeah, right. And in 12 months, every business unit had a service offering portfolio that didn't exist 12 months before. I'm not saying it's all good. They created their services faster than we could create the platform, which is extraordinary. So the company pulls internally. We didn't have to go and start a company outside. We might still, but we didn't have to change the company in terms of digital. So that's good. Everyone's active. We've got business areas building whole dedicated pilot plants just to build IoT services, predictive maintenance, all this kind of stuff off them, and do analytics. We have a single IoT platform across the company which allows us to aggregate data and create the high level of services afterwards. If you don't have that, it's very difficult to see where you move to next. I think we're almost at 10 new commercial services launched this year, versus 0 for the last 157, okay? That's a hell of a step. We're generating turnover. Now the thing is, how do we scale and multiply across all our companies, across the whole world? That's the target we face at the moment. And that's what we're busily doing with lots of partners and lots of people who have cool ideas. I just want to be clear, that's not the only thing we do. So digital is very important. We have very clear turnover targets. We run it as a business, and we're driving it in the company. This year, we did something else really cool. If we're going to feed 9 billion people in 2050, we have to produce 265 million tons more protein per year if we consume protein at the rate that we're going today. We're not doing this from livestock, my friends. That is not going to work. It is not sustainable today, and it will certainly not provide for another 1.5 billion people. We can forget it. The pressure on the agricultural system is too high. We're taking wild catch out of the sea to feed, to make fish. We catch 8 kilos of fish to make a kilo of fish. Can anyone give me some logical explanation behind that? Makes no sense. So we said, what do? We looked at all the alternatives. We're the leaders in plant protein processing to make things like textured vegetable proteins, so meat extenders, meat replacers. And we said, we think insects is next. And we found this brilliant startup. The world of serendipity is beautiful. I sat at the World Economic Forum. We were looking at in a session on ocean plastics. It was not the level that we were expecting. And the Dutch guy next to me and I went, oh, come on, we go for coffee. And we went out, and it turned out he's the best insect producer in the world. He has his startup. They're making a couple of thousand tons a year. We sat down at a table and literally, honestly, on a napkin, drew the joint venture between our companies. And 2 years later, we formed it, we launched it. We're now building the first insect processing plants on full industrial scale that would be food grade, but we are selling for fish food, aquaculture, and poultry. And we're convinced that that is the most sustainable protein source we have at the moment, because you take organic waste, you recover 70% of the nutrients, you put it into protein with a very good conversion rate into animals, and then we have a much more sustainable feed value chain. So that's cool, we're doing that. E-mobility, we took technology from food, we started making battery slurries. You take out the inconsistency batch to batch in battery production. You know, one of the issues you have is you mix a slurry, you make your batteries, and I can tell you 400 meters later at the end of the line you have a battery. And then you go into quality testing and you find out if you mix the slurry well. And if you didn't, you throw it away. And you've got scrap rates in the 20% plus. That doesn't make it very economical to make batteries for electric cars. Our technology, we've also increased the energy density significantly with the same formula, which means the range goes up, the quality goes up. So we're very popular. To give you a feeling, in the US, the aspiration for electric vehicles is to build the gigafactory, isn't it? Our friend at Tesla talks about building the gigafactory. In China, the gigafactory is the unit of measurement, not the aspiration. And in Europe, we're a long way behind. So 3 cool things that we're doing. Now, the question that preoccupies me, because I said this is all about why, this is all about sense of purpose. The utilization of technologies and capabilities is about what do you want to solve? And the question that we always say is, how do I feed 9 billion people in 2050? And the question I always get is, can we? Will we? Is it sustainable? Is it worth having children? But you see, as a CTO, your job is to be optimistic. So I would say yes, 100% yes, but we're going to have an adoption of new technologies in a smart and focused way. That's where the digital part comes in. We need new business models because it doesn't work the way that we look at value chains today, the way that we set up contracts, the way that we protect our self-interests and we optimize our self-interests to basically to a negative impact on the rest of the value chain. That doesn't work. So you have to look at business models that allow you to optimize systems and have a genuine win-win. You have to be more entrepreneurial. We have to unlock the entrepreneurial ecosystem and value, not just in companies, but across countries. And just a note there for that, competition is tremendously important. Because of the 70 startups that we have in our accelerator, I hope that we will help some of them reach the decision that they should probably not start companies and run them. Because not everyone is an entrepreneur. It's okay to kill a company. We have to learn to experiment, and failure is okay. So entrepreneurship is very important. And this massive new type of collaboration is the only way that we have a chance of solving and tackling some of these problems. So that's what we're trying to do. I hope some of it was interesting. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We have time for a couple of questions before we go for insect snacks. So
yep.
I want to open up the platform for some questions because Bühler, how many of you guys knew what Bühler did before you walked in here today? Okay, that's a lot.
That's more than usual.
That's the Swiss pride, I guess, that really comes out there. You know, actually, one of the things that I liked a lot is the processing of these different things. Like, we never think about how these things come from. Somebody in the audience today posted about unicorn Fruit Loops. And I thought about, like, the processing steps that goes behind that to produce a product like that. It's just incredible to see how far back the value chain goes that we never see as consumers. Perfect. I'd like to open up the round for questions. So who would like to ask the first question? Perfect. The cube's right in front of you, so that's you got the first question.
Ian, I wonder how you went about the cultural transformation from a Swiss typical engineering company to something which is network connected to the world and truly innovative.
Well, yes, that might require a longer answer, but I mean, basically, I was hired into the company 6 years ago, and my mission was threefold. The first one was turn R&D into business generation. The second one was to ensure that disruptive technologies that were threatening to us or opportunities we had access to. And the third was to change the culture of innovation. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of initiatives. It's not generally welcome. But on the whole, if you've got a technology company, people love new stuff. People love cool challenges. It's about how you pitch it to them, and it's about how you engage with them, involve them, and empower them to take actions based on this. So the first thing you do is you get the whole world, your world, to engage on solving a problem and building a solution. And then you empower them to be able to, I mean, if I say, look, I can take you out of work for 4 months to build this into a business, and if you want, you can spin it out. That's quite compelling. That's pretty cool. So that's exciting, the organization. It's, I mean, what are they? I think it's a hell of a lot of inspiring, repeating the messages, fantastic top-level support. The CEO hired me, so he gave me a mission. That means he covered me every time I screwed everything up. And we just went and we drove the mission. But the company wanted to change and was ready to change. And I think that made it phenomenally, was considerably easier for us.
Perfect. Thank you. We have another question back there. Hold on, let me get you the cube here. I'll toss it to you. There you go.
Thank you. It was really inspirational, your vision of the future world with no nutrition problems or less nutrition problems. If you see the European Union and other governments making more and more regulations, and yeah, trade is not getting easier in the years, especially with some interesting leaders in the free world. What would be your advice for those governments? What could they make better?
Look, the role of government is to enable entrepreneurship with good values, with guidelines that ensure that we have free trade. The role of the universities is to create the thought leadership, the talent, and the technologies, and the solutions for the future. And the role of industry is to make it all happen. Okay? So I think everyone has a clear role. The governments shouldn't get out of the way, they should referee.
We have time for about 3 more questions, so just toss the cube forward. Yep.
Which you think are the 3 most important values that you should have in a successful company to face the future?
I don't know if it's the 3 most important, but I mean, you have to be credible. Credible means that you have to do what you say you will do. Otherwise, you have no trust. Otherwise, no one will believe you. I think you have to have a workforce that does the right thing. You know, I'm an engineer. I mean, look at what engineers have been covering up. Not so far from here. Engineers have been helping companies to lie. Don't tell me that engineers didn't know what they were doing. We need to put a workforce out that instinctively, without question, knows right from wrong, and you have to empower them to exercise that right in all your companies. And I think the 3rd one, let's say, you've got to be curious. You've got to want to do good things. But this, I tell you, instinctively doing the right thing and not waiting to follow orders and not following processes, even if you know that it's detrimental. This is what we have to instill in our kids and in the students, because we've lost that focus.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question? I saw one a little further back. Do we have any more questions? Who likes chocolate? No. And there you go. No, perfect. Thank you very much for coming out here. And let me get you, we got a little something for you as well. Hold on. Oh, here we go. So this is to listen to customers, actually.
Very good.
So this is always good. And obviously the bag to carry it in. It doesn't scan rice, but you know, maybe that's something we could build in the future.
And we can put a rice scanner into it.
That's cool.
Fine.
Perfect. Thank you very much for coming out. It was a great pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, please, a round of applause. Thank you. A round of applause. Max Stossel.
Hi guys, thanks for coming, thanks for your time. One thing I like to start with is take one big deep breath in and out. One more time with an audible exhale in and out. It feels good to be a human being. I'm a poet and filmmaker and part of a movement called Time Well Spent, which is a movement to align technology with our humanity. And the reason I'm here with you today is before I became an artist, I spent about 8 years working in social digital media and paying very, very, very close attention to how these algorithms that have come to so deeply influence the way we receive information, the stories we tell, and what we share, how they've changed our world. And so I first sort of got exposed to this. It was 2009, 2010. I was doing social strategy for Budweiser. There's this new Facebook thing. We're supposed to be on it. What should we do on this? Nobody wants to read our press releases. And so, okay, we took a look at what would work in this Facebook algorithm system. And what we found worked were 2 things. 1, putting ideas in front of people that they already believe. And 2, extreme statements. And, you know, people, they liked beer, they liked Budweiser. Hero shots of product worked, and, you know, whatever. Then saying Budweiser is the greatest beer did a whole lot better than here's how Budweiser is made. The extreme statements when you're saying you're the king of beers gets positive comments, negative comments, it's all good for reach, and that was the goal. And who cares? Well, who cares what brands do on social media? Honestly, whatever, it doesn't have very much of an impact. But what was jarring to me was when I started to watch the rest of the world follow these same patterns. When I started to see news organizations tailoring the stories that they tell in the same way we were doing at Budweiser. And so, there's a version of this that's been happening throughout history, where there's a thing that happens, and it's the news's job to express that to the world, and they have to tweak it to make it as exciting and as engaging as possible. But for the first time in history, there is an algorithm and a series of a couple of algorithms that have a huge amount of power over what actually reaches an audience and what doesn't. So the people at these news organizations feel the need to tailor their message to what works in this algorithm, putting ideas in front of people of things they already believe, and extremes tend to work very well. And it's not just clickbaity headlines. You might remember the Ebola scare in 2014, which is a good example of this. Any sort of expert on the subject would have told you there's no real threat. The doctor followed the protocol to the T. But as also has happened throughout history, news organizations tend to make a big deal out of these medical scares because it drives a lot of traffic and creates a lot of ad revenue. But once again, never before in history has there been such gasoline to pour on this fire. It's all set up. There were something like 5,000 tweets a second that were happening at a certain moment here. This is unprecedented speeds and volume at which both misinformation and all sorts of information can spread in this attention economy where these algorithms are maximized for engagement. Engagement is the thing that is most prioritized. And so what that's done is it's tipped the scales. And this is, again, always existed in news. But because these people at these news organizations feel so enslaved to reach, enslaved to these algorithms, that we've reached a point where what's exciting or what is outrageous or what makes people angry has started to really dominate over what is true and what is accurate. And it was shocking to me that a little algorithm, one company or a couple of companies' choices as to what to show and what not to show could so gravely change the nature of stories that we're telling. And so another consequence of this, and many of you have probably seen this, the Washington Post put something together called Red Feed, Blue Feed, which is Facebook is trying to show you the most engaging, best content they can for you. And one consequence of this is a lot of personalization. And it's not just Facebook. When I Google things and you Google things, at times we see different results based on demographics, what device we're on, Wi-Fi, etc. Organizations like the New York Times will send us different push notifications based on our history of what we've read. So we have this very personalized news system. And when you combine that with so much data, Facebook records everything, Google records everything, you have a very effective mechanism of showing people exactly really what we already believe. And when we see opposing points of view, they're presented in ways that are sort of designed to make us angry, to enrage us. Got to get in that comment battle with that person and tell them how stupid they are, and we're all spending more time on the apps as we're doing that. It's very challenging to present opposing ideas in an actually neutral way, but it's just not the priority in these systems. And if you remember that time you scrolled through her pictures for a full 20 minutes but didn't like anything, because Facebook remembers. Facebook remembers everything you've ever clicked on, what you hover over, and for how long, what you've liked, shared, and commented on, whose profiles you visited, and how deep you've gone. Facebook owns Instagram. And Instagram tracks the location of every picture you've ever taken. Facebook owns WhatsApp, and what's that but a way to track your messages back across your social graph? Facebook knows. And Facebook likes to show you content you'll like ideas you've already liked and people with like ideas. So what happens when our perception of the world becomes an algorithm designed to feed us what's already on our minds? Versus opening our minds, exposing our minds, and leaving our preconceived notions behind. What happens when Democrats are fed only hero stories about Democrats and horror stories about Republicans? When exactly the inverse is true too, then what happens? And it's not just politics, but with any conflict. What happens when it becomes completely impossible to empathize with the other side because we're immersed in the confines of our own minds and like minds, and I want to like your mind, even if it isn't like mine, though anatomically it's almost exactly like mine. But you've been taught differently than I. Your values differ from mine, and that's fine so long as we're open to each other's sides and don't resort to clawing out each other's eyes, getting so trapped in our beliefs that we hide, condemning evidence that hurts our side with secrets and with lies. And if you took that last line about hiding, condemning secrets and lies to be about the other side, it's not. It's about your side, and I say that to all sides. The truth matters most when it is not on your side. And don't get me wrong, social networks can be powerful forces for good, and we should empower those being silenced by tyrants, give a voice to the quiet and misunderstood. But can we get some transparency? Because recently, I've been trying to hide my browser history from everybody. Just because I don't want the internet classifying me, I want to see what the world wants me to see without being encumbered by all these algorithmic biases. My reasons for desiring so much privacy are less about what you're taking and more about what you're serving me. And I know I could turn on the tab of recency, but so long as everyone else is subject to being test subjects in digital laboratories, I'd like to keep them company. And if you're not convinced this filtration system's dangerous, think about the child growing up digitally ingrained in ISIS and what he might think the value of a life is. And then try and understand that our cultural bubble has us believing something almost as troubling. We'd be blinded to it, as with all these affirmations, our beliefs will be redoubling, and I don't claim to be able to navigate the very maze that I'm describing. But let's take this moment together, recognizing that our world is a story. These algorithms are co-writing. So let's seek out opposing opinions actively, respect our opposition's intelligence, explore alternatives with empathy. Let's never stop striving for variety, because there are some things that Facebook, Google, this whole personalized web doesn't know. It doesn't know the emotional impact of constant FOMO. It doesn't know how gratifying it is to overcome discomfort and then truly grow. It doesn't know there are some people I need to let go, even if I'll never stop clicking their photo. It doesn't know how much the world needs voices with which we don't agree, how badly we need empathy for our fellow human beings. Everybody thinks they're the good guy. Everybody. Everybody's not wrong because they disagree. There's data to back up their opinions too. Our world now has so much bias that it's rare to find an ounce of truth, and the moment we stop looking for it, searching for it actively, we'll lose. These algorithms don't care about bringing humanity together. Do you? So yeah, I'm a poet, and I do poetry stuff sometimes. Thank you. And so I'd like to say that, I realized social media had these negative connotations and I stopped working on it. A lot of this, honestly, took me a very long time to put together. When I stopped doing social strategy about 3-4 years later, I fell in love with the startup world and thought, hey, I know social media. I'll work on a social media startup. And have you ever looked down at your phone and computer and then immediately forgotten why? Show of hands. Yeah, good. And some liars. Perfect. So that was my job. I was designing notification structures to take you out of your world and bring you into mine. And many of you in this room are familiar with the industry. You're familiar with maximizing for that engagement. And it works. Like, we're humans. We're persuadable. There are some tactics that just work at grabbing and holding our attention. Auto-playing videos, for example, will keep people in an app or experience a little bit longer than if they have to click play themselves. If you look up variable rewards, a lot of the phone is built a lot like a slot machine. It's like when clicking that red little icon, we're pulling the lever. Ooh, what am I going to get? Am I going to get a text from that person I care about? Am I going to get a notification that matters to me? And sometimes you get it, and sometimes you don't. And I realized that my goals weren't the same as the goals of the people who are using my product. We were told that if we could keep you for 2 minutes or longer, we had a valuable company. And so we wanted to raise our Series A at a high valuation. And so that was my goal. And we were creating sort of social engineering to try to give people things they wanted, but we weren't really aligned. And I realized that was the case for Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, for the entire attention economy, where everybody has to, with advertising models, hold more attention this year than they had last year. The investors demand it. And I realized that as architects of our digital world, we need to be better, because we can be. And we can see that these systems are designed with intricacy so that companies can keep our attention indefinitely. I don't want to keep crushing these fucking candies. I don't want these alerts to completely command me. I don't care if that panda bear is dancing. Well, maybe. With a hula hoop. Okay, this is fantastic. I have to share this with my 10 friends and 10,000 strangers. Caption, who wants to throw a panda rager? Great, let me go back about my life. For God's sakes, I'm trying to right swipe my wife. Huh. It's been 30 seconds and just 2 Facebook likes. Or is that just 2 for which I've been notified? Let me go back and check inside and see whose likes they tried to hide. They don't show them all. I wonder why. This panda's dancing. And another video plays after automatically. This one of a gopher that stage turns dramatically. It's like my attention is kept systematically raptured by algorithms that know exactly what I want. Or not what I want, just what I'll watch. And the people behind this intelligent design genuinely want to better our lives, but their bonuses just so happen to be tied to keeping time on site exceptionally high. And now even my news apps have been gamified, and what am I, not gonna click the one simple sex tip guaranteed to blow her mind? Wait, where was I? And why have I forgotten to look for that thing I'm supposed to find? And my God, look at the time. It is shocking. But somehow, yes, Netflix, I am still watching. And I know, I should have more self-control. But just so we're clear, you just spent a couple $1 million producing this story designed to cut off at the end, leaving me wanting more. See, of course, I want to see what you have in store. See my cursor already waiting there on the screen floor as you tease the next hour in all of its glory, and you'll give it to me, unless I actively abort. It seems this decision's already made for me. The countdown clock's moving. There it goes. 5, 4, 3. I need to sleep. But you made me want this more. This is not what I consciously signed up for when I hit play on one episode 6 hours ago. And so there's become a fundamental difference between what we want and what we'll watch. We have so much data. We understand the way the brain works, and we understand design well enough to truly be able to manipulate people into doing things that they wouldn't necessarily want to do. And when I was doing it, I didn't process that I was doing it. I thought, oh, I'm getting people to spend more time. They must like doing this. But it's just not the case. And so an example of this here, this app called Moment. People take screenshots of their battery life, and then they look back over their time, and they're asked, oh, was this a good use of your time? Or were you happy with this use of your time, or were you not happy with this use of your time? And what's interesting when you look at this is that the apps we're spending the most time on have the highest percentage of unhappy users of those apps. You look at, it's funny that Grindr is the first one. There's a whole mess of sort of unsatisfying probably behaviors that's going on there. Candy Crush, Facebook, Reddit. I didn't mean that in an anti-gay way, by the way. I just meant like the meaningless sex part. Weibo, Tinder, Subway Surf, like these are a lot of the gaming apps, Instagram, Snapchat. And on the left, the ones that are making people happy tend to Calm as a meditation app, tend to be utilities. And actually, it's interesting that audio, people tend to rate their use as satisfying of. But when we get into that visual atmosphere, people are much less happy. And, and there, of course, you could point to problems with how this data is collected. People are willing to take this survey, but I think it still says something. And similarly here too, on average, happy users of apps spend about 2.4 times less on the specific app than people who rated their use as unhappy. Like, these are great. Technology is amazing. Powerful tools that like connect us and do all these fantastic things. But what does it say that the person at, let's find, where's Facebook on here? Facebook, when like the happy average user is spending about 20 minutes a day and the unhappy user is spending like an hour. And when the person at Facebook's job is to get them to spend as much time as possible, there's a disconnect. Our goals are not the same as the user's goals. And it's going to seem like I'm taking a sidetrack here. But that point of our goals are not the same as users' goals is very interesting. And so, we've all heard the stories of, oh my God, AI is going to come and kill us all. And it's going to be a big robot foot that stomps on our faces. But what I like about this image is, you think about the intelligence, computational power of an ant to us, to a computer. And computers, you could argue, are not more intelligent than people yet, but in some ways they obviously outperform us significantly. But so we don't go out of our way to harm ants, most of us. In fact, often we take great care to pick them up and to not harm them. But the moment that our goals are not the same as their goals, the moment that we want to, really just that their goals interfere, or our goals, they interfere with our goals. When we want to build, for example, on an anthill, we annihilate them without any sort of question about it. And I'd actually like to argue that we've already lost the first battle to AI. That we should be thinking less about future runaway algorithms that are going to physically stomp on us, and think more about the runaway algorithms that exist today that have just stopped prioritizing the things that we care about. And we often think with runaway AI, think about this. This is the standard we're all going to die AI future image. And yeah, it's scary, but it feels to me much less likely than this. And which is from WALL-E, which is great. And this idea that we get farmed for our attention. And it's so engaging. You guys are happy. There's such good content on the TVs, and it's just so good and so engaging. But we're just sort of convinced the attack is mental and not physical. And what we want is fundamentally altered. And of course, this is a joke. This would never actually, happen. This isn't the type of thing that could, exist in the... Oh, sorry, I changed the slide there. So it's... I used to use that as a joke, and this picture came out, and it was quite funny, and that's, it's not fair. This is a demo, and everybody isn't doing this all the time. But it's, but we're doing this all the time. And when we're not looking at it there, any experience we're having, we're doing this on the other side of it. And so at what point do we sort of ask ourselves of have we been truly has our minds been hijacked? Are we using technology, or is it using us? Have we already lost this first battle with AI? I think the next slide plays automatically. So I don't want, a lot of us don't work at Facebook, Google, Apple, the places that have disproportionate power to make systemic change in this industry. But I do want to give some examples of how we can kind of take a step back from this and think differently, especially about advertising models when we are designing our own tech products. Oh, that's not the next slide, but I like this. This is an artist who photoshops the phones out of pictures. And it's, have we have we lost the first battle with AI here? Is this how we want to live? And again, it's not about, we're on our phones all the time. It's what we're seeing. It's what is engaging us. It's the extreme stuff. It's the, the super addictive sort of information and how that's persuading us that I'm more concerned about. The quality of life, of course, is not ideal when we're always here. But some examples of how it can be different and designed for human values.
If you're like me, you've too often been sitting at an airport or crammed onto a middle seat of a plane at some horrid hour, either late at night or early in the morning, and you're thinking to yourself, why didn't I just spend those extra $40 on that other flight? We like to think that we're making conscious choices. But when we're all in a rush, the more we rely on the menus in front of us. Hipmunk is a travel website that recognized this, and they let you sort choices by human values. It's not just price or duration, but they let you sort by agony. They do this because they ask themselves, what is sorting for a price or duration about? It's not just about the raw numbers, it's about the human experience and values behind travel. So it's important to ask ourselves, what are the human values at stake in this choice? Another example where technology can help us live by our values could be when you're looking for directions from point A to point B. Of course, we know we could walk, but what if, since you've told your phone in your settings that you've been wanting to exercise, it put a choice on life's menu that said, or you could walk, and here's the fitness goal you could achieve by doing so. Or maybe in your settings, instead of valuing exercise, you've said you valued productivity, so it offers up a podcast you might like to finish in that time. 28 minutes left in the podcast, 30-minute walk, it's on your team. There could be menus that sort choices by what matters to you. We can upgrade the goal from getting to point A to point B efficiently to getting from point A to point B well. And remember, no one decides what well means to you but you. What if technology was on your team to help you live by your values?
So I want to give a couple more examples of things like this. And we're aligning the reasons, not just the behavior, which I think we've come to a point where our behaviors are not necessarily aligned with what we want in our actions, as some of this earlier information has showed, but we align the reasons people are doing things with what our AI or what our technology is optimizing for. So couch surfing is a website that matches travelers with people who want a couch to crash on. And you might think they would be optimizing for matching the most travelers with the most people with couches. But what they actually do is they estimate the total number of hours that the people have spent together. They take the ratings, and they subtract the time spent on couchsurfing.com because that's a cost to our lives. And so they've created a metric that they jokingly call net good times, which is because couchsurfing exists, this many positively rated hours exist in the world. And if you think about it, how empowering would it be to live in a world where that's how technology were measuring its success, based on how well it really brought us value? What if devices were not being optimized for just endless scrolls, but were being optimized for quick in and out choices or quick in and out actions that let us get what we need from technology and put it down? If home screens and if browsers were optimized for both on-screen and off-screen choices, has so much data, so much ability, why not use those, see what actually matters to us and let us decide? Social networks, what if they weren't optimized for time spent and for engagement? What if they were optimized to reduce human loneliness? It's something we can measure. Creating meaningful experiences, spending time with people we've indicated that we really care about and want to spend more time with. That's social network. News feeds, if they weren't optimized for clicks, for engagement, but if they were optimized for in-depth reporting, if they were optimized for accurate information from a did this happen or did this not happen standpoint. And this might sound all far-fetched, we're on different models and that's not how it works. But I really believe there's a market here. I'm very much willing to pay, and know many others are willing to pay for products that are actually caring about me and about my values, that are on my team. And I would not pay for Facebook now by any means, but if it were using the mass amounts of data that it had on me to align with me and give me things I care about, I absolutely would. And so there are companies who have already started measuring their success in human values. Meetup here helps create 1 million hours of people connecting in real life every month. Headspace helps each user add 10 minutes of calm and lower stress every morning. AdBlock helps each user reclaim 30 to 40% of their attention across the internet. Asana helps teams become 45% more efficient. Hinge helps each user spend 80% less time swiping and 5 times more in conversations. Many dating apps optimize for number of swipes, which is not what we want out of relationships. Duolingo helps each user learn a university semester's worth of language in 34 hours of use. So the theme across all of these, and you'll notice many of these are paid products because people are willing to pay for these values to be aligned. But the reasons that we come into these experiences and the things they're measuring their success about we're on the same page. And that's extremely, extremely important, especially as machine learning algorithms get so good at optimizing for whatever we're setting them to optimize, they damn well better be optimizing for what we actually want. Or we end up in a situation that we're in now, where you look at the state of news and you look at the state of politics, and you see things are better than they've ever been from most measurements. But we're panicking about everything. There's a disconnect there because that works in our ecosystem. I think that's my last slide. But yeah, architects of our digital world. You have more data, information, and control over our attention, the tools to tweak our emotions so we'll return to your experience. But is that what we should do? Or should you build digital tools so advanced they can actually enhance the world outside the device in our hands? Can you add so much value that it lets us put our phones back in our pants as fast as we possibly can? Not time-sucking, time-giving innovation. That's what it means to be truly technologically advanced. The future is not all screens. It's humanity enhanced. Thank you guys very much.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the incredible performance.
Appreciate it.
And for bringing up a very important topic, this digital addiction, right? I mean, I'm still waiting for the job ad for, digital addiction specialist, like dealers, it's kind of like drug dealers. Yeah, no, we deal content, actually. But perfect. I want to open up the round of questions, if that's okay for you.
Yeah, perfect.
And I want to jump out there. Do you guys have any questions? Maybe let's start with one to you guys. How many hours do you waste per day on your phone? Like over an hour? Over 2 hours? Okay, that's better. Do you think they're lying?
I mean, some, of course, are always lying. But I think we don't know. One of the things that I think would be extremely helpful for technology to do is to mirror our actions back to us, is to help us. Right, Moment is an app that lets you do it, but it's kind of cumbersome to go through that process. If within our operating systems, it could help us see how we are spending our times, that gives us the power to moderate that. But the truth is, if we were to recognize, hey, you spent 3 hours on Facebook today, that's not in Facebook's best interest to show us, because the reaction would be, oh wow, I got to do this less.
You kind of fall into it, right? Because there's a Google Chrome add-on there, so you could block Facebook.com for a couple hours a day. And, you find yourself going back there and you're like, a page is blocked. You're like, damn it, they got me again. So this happens pretty frequently.
Yeah, and there are a bunch of tools, extensions that are out there that will block Facebook newsfeed, so you can use some of the other great features on it without being sucked into that hole. We're starting to see a market for.
Do you have any recommendations? Maybe that'd be interesting to save a few hours of your time.
I would love to. I'm actually blanking on I just looked up like a bunch, and I'm blanking on the name. Newsfeed Exterminator, Eliminator. It's called one of those things. And there's YouTube DF, YouTube Distraction Free, which blocks like the next videos and the other suggestions, and lets you go into what you're doing. And it's Band-Aids. We need systemic fixes to this problem, but it's cool that there's a market popping up for that too.
Very much so, on the interest element side. Perfect. I want to open up the round for questions. Hold on, let me throw you the cube here. All right, here.
Hi there. I'm curious, not that you probably would do this, but if you would go back to Budweiser and work on social. Because in most big corporations have social strategy as part of their kind of agenda right now. What would you do different? How would you approach it differently, knowing that there is a piece of kind of share of voice that every company is looking for?
Yeah, so it's funny because I was doing this then too. They were so pumped that their engagement was skyrocketing. They were like, oh my God, this is, I was like, what did this do? Like, how did this help your business? Like at all? Like, are we measuring sales? Can we like geo-target certain areas and see if we're selling more beer? They just didn't care. They were just like, look, the line, it's going up on the graph. But so it's, if I were going, like, I now have deeply complicated relationships with social media. But I'm big on why. I'm big on asking ahead of time, of being like, why are we doing this? What are we actually gaining out of this process? What is the goal we're trying to accomplish, and how can social media help us achieve that goal? And because it's a reality, right? Like, we need to, for most of our businesses here, we need to reach people. So we're stuck in this attention war, and social media is a powerful tool of winning that attention war, or at least competing in it. But I would say, can we really be thoughtful about what we're asking of people and what we're giving people, and can we add real value in the space? Is that possible? I personally almost never share things anymore because I often just have a hard time, really, if I'm looking inward, being like, why do I need to share this with everybody? Why can't I send this to a friend who I want? It's often a reflection of my own insecurity as opposed to but you can't,
Unless it's a dancing panda, right?
Unless it's a dancing panda. And also, in my video, I may turn these into films, and those rely on social media. And so I just have to kind of convince myself, well, I believe I'm caring enough to really respect everybody's time and believe what I'm putting out is actually more valuable than something else they might be doing. But it's complicated to me. Yeah.
Perfect. Next question. Does anybody else have a question? Oh, yeah, in the back. You can just toss it back. Just don't hit the camera. Perfect.
My question is do you have any strategies that you can recommend that would help us to get out of this filter that we're in?
As consumers?
Yes.
And there's timewellspent.io is the website for this movement. It has some good strategies. I'll list off a couple, but you'll forget them because it's a busy day, and you can go back there and see them. So one is setting your notifications. So notifications are a really powerful tool that app designers and developers can use to hook you in, right? Your phone has everything you need. All of a sudden, you've got this jolt. If you can set your notifications to only alert you when you're getting something from a person and not a machine, it's like you're getting text messages, you're getting WhatsApp, someone's trying to contact you versus liked your photo. Someone tagged you in a photo, like that idea of a little message saying this person tagged you in a photo. It's like someone said something about you to the whole internet. You don't have to look at it now, it's fine. But do you maybe want to like come into our environment of like turning off some of their ability to send you those manipulative time sucks and have people be in control of notifications. Another is mornings. We're very vulnerable. Many of us, our alarm clocks are our phones. So we wake up, boom, turn off the alarm clock, and all of a sudden we're behind. We've missed a million things, and there's so many options to be sucked in. Alarm clocks are $8 on Amazon. So buying a physical alarm clock and charging your phone outside of your bedroom is a really powerful way to take control of your day. And the final one I'll give is, and I think there are a couple more on the site, but I have all of my apps that are not utilities in a folder on my second page. And whenever I want to go to something, I scroll down to search versus going. Just makes it a little bit more of a conscious choice. I want to open Instagram. I want to open this thing. You may relate to like opening up your phone, swiping through your apps, swiping back through your apps, closing your phone. You guys ever done that? It's a ridiculous behavior that we've started to do. But it sort of takes away the
thumb exercise,
making ssure they're there. It just makes it more of a conscious choice to go into something. Those are 3 tools that have been helpful to me. But they're Band-Aids. We need to get the designers of a lot of these technologies on our team.
It's like the no phone. Did you see this as an April Fool's joke? Somebody built like a fake iPhone that just 3D printed a piece of plastic. It's a really funny thing. It's like, oh, my no phone. Yeah, I got that instinctive grab. It's like cigarettes, right? You're just like, yeah, sorry.
The no phone. And it's a shame that it often has to be either all on or either all off right now, because technology is fantastic. But when we're in this attention economy, there's so much grab for us that often it feels like totally disconnecting is the only way to deal with it, which shouldn't have to be like that. But also, if you never have totally disconnected, I recommend that too, just to
There's no push notifications on typewriters, right?
Right.
Perfect. Do we have any other questions? Is that a picture or question?
We got someone.
Oh, picture. All right.
We got someone.
In the back? Oh, perfect. Just throw the dice or pass it. That's a little safer.
Sometimes I wonder, why are we so uncritical towards technology as opposed to, let's just imagine this technology would be a political party. Wouldn't there be more debate about how it works and what it does to us and what it could do? Sometimes it feels like we're starstruck. We look at it and we're like, oh my God, wow.
And also there's this storyline that technology is a tool. It can be used for good, it can be used for evil. It's up to us to decide how we should use this thing. We can't criticize the technology, it's just there. There's just sort of some false logic because we've gotten so good at persuasion and we are persuadable. And the idea that like Facebook's neutral, it's people that decide we want this. We want the popular stuff. We want the cat videos. We want Trump. That's what the algorithm decides because that's what people are clicking on. So like there's this idea that technology is neutral and we'll just put it out and let people decide. But I think and that's the reason I think there's not more criticism to it. But I think we need to acknowledge that by not making a choice, we're choosing the base human instincts, and like we're going to let that, dictate how our environments work. But yeah, let's be more critical. Let's, talk about it with your friends and think about how technology is influencing us and the world around us.
I think one of the first steps of addiction is to actually realize you're addicted to this, right? I mean, I don't. How many people say they're addicted to their phone? Okay. So I guess everybody's guilty now, but it's one of those things you wouldn't say like, "Hi, I'm addicted to my phone." It's just something that it's like normal, right? It's like, yeah, of course.
It brings us so much value in so many ways that we tolerate it.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's positive sides, up and down sides.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Maybe upstairs as well. I know it's really hard to see because
there's upstairs.
Bright light upstairs of the bright minds.
I'm sorry for not looking at you the entire time.
I know. It's like the polar star up there. You see that? It's like yeah. Anybody have any questions up there? There should be a mic also running.
We got some over here.
Or down here. Yep, just toss the cube. Or actually throw in this.
I don't dare.
Yeah. It looks softer than it is.
Thanks. I wonder how you feel about, you're giving a presentation about stuff that I guess most of us already know or have heard somehow. In your presentation, you also say that Facebook is successful, or all these social media companies are successful because they show us stuff that we like to see and that we already kind of know. And so how do you feel about using the same principles now on stage? It's just a change of medium, but you use the same principles.
Sure. So, I mean, I think I would probably assume that probably half the room here would be very familiar with lots of what I'm talking about. And I would say half of the people here would probably have not thought about it in this way. But in terms of like preaching to the choir, it's a problem. Like I would love to, we are talking to we talk to the people at Facebook, at Google, and try to tell them to their faces of like, hey, this is here's how this is affecting us, and we're not happy with it. And can we open up this dialogue? The filter, and also I think on Facebook, just to correct one piece of what you mentioned, it's not just things we like on Facebook, but it's things that will that we'll engage with, things that will trigger, things that will keep us there, and that tend to fundamentally agree with our ideas.
Please allow one follow-up question.
Yeah, of course.
How do you plan, or how do you approach the getting over the bubble? So are there strategies how you, for example, your presentation, how you could give them to an audience that doesn't want to hear it, or what are your strategies to get across it?
So I absolutely believe we need a sort of revolution in communication. There's the environment, and this is, I'll stray a bit, but I'll come back. The environment of Facebook, where here's an idea, here's a little box, type your opinion, your feeling about this bot. Have you ever seen a positive resolution in a Facebook war? Right? Everything just sort of builds and builds and builds. It is not really an environment that is very conducive to solution. Maybe we can empower people to get together face to face. Face is a much more powerful medium of resolving conflicts. Can we use technology to empower more of that discussion across the aisle? Can we have compassion correct in our typing that says, oh, you're writing this, which may make this, our data shows this may make this person react adversely to what you're saying. Would you like to change this and this word to make it a little bit more, digestible for them? Can we use technology to help? Because that's the thing, and that's Facebook defends themselves saying, no, more people are exposed to other ideas. And yes, that's true. But they're being presented in ways that are not appealing or digestible in any way. And if that were a priority, I think they could do it quite well. They've got, I don't know how many employees. They could figure out better solutions than I could, but I think those are starting points.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you very much. I think that's all that we have time
guys.
for a question. Thank you. A big round of applause. And hold on, we've got you. Thank you very much. Also, we're also going to send you back with the sounds of the future, and obviously the bag to carry that in.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Perfect. Thank you. Good. Now, we can take a minute to just check our phones before we get going here. Folks, we're about to hop from the East Coast to the West Coast, and we're going to talk a little bit about venture capital. Our next speaker is here to talk a little bit about the mysteries of Silicon Valley capitalism and Silicon Valley venture capital. And I'm actually really curious about that secret door that spits out money at all ideas. So I'm very curious to hear what he has to say. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ben Narasin. Thank you. Welcome.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, there you go. I have no presentation except my words. I sat in that chair for the last 45 minutes listening to Max, and my butt hurt. So stand up. Just get out of the chair for 1 second, because I'm going to ask you guys questions anyway. This, by the way, is a trick to keep your audience from looking at their phone, because you can't look at your phone while you're standing up. So how many people, just so I understand the audience, how many people here are entrepreneurs? Okay. Investors, couple, and corporate folk. All right, great. So have a seat. I'm going to talk about 3 things, and then I'm going to leave a lot of time for questions. Max had that awesome haiku. I don't have one, so all I can do is try to do a better job on the Q&A. So think of what you want to ask. You'll find that I am probably the least filtered person in Silicon Valley. I will answer any question you ask as long as I'm not breaching a fiduciary trust to one of my entrepreneurs. So I'm going to tell you 3 things. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, not just because I like to talk about myself, but because if you understand where I come from, then you'll understand whether you care about what I have to say. Then I'll talk a little bit about the last 10 years in Silicon Valley and the evolution of how venture capital has changed over that time, because it's changed a lot. And then talk about what venture needs and wants and what sort of entrepreneurs should think about it. Because venture capital is a very valuable source of capital, but it's an appropriate source for certain types of businesses, and it's a small subset. And as somebody said to me earlier, it's not like you go to Silicon Valley and they literally throw money at you. Although, I will tell you one funny story. There's a guy who told me that he literally had VCs. There are a lot of people that do bicycling, competitive bicycling on the road. And he said he would have VCs trying to force him to take a check from bike to bike because he was so famous. That was Tony Fadell, who started Nest. He did so well at Apple that everybody wanted to give him money, and they literally would give him money not knowing what he was going to do. There is one reality in Silicon Valley that is true. If you've achieved enough, everybody wants a piece of your next thing. So that part I'll come back to in a little bit. So me, spent 25 years as an entrepreneur. I started my first business when I was 12. My father loaned me $50. I went to a comic book convention, bought a dealer's table, took my collection, came home with $1,500 in a paper bag. My dad became a big convert to my entrepreneurial future, and it's all I ever did thereafter. He reminds me that I never paid him back for that $50. I thought of it as equity. He thought of it as debt. It was a little different. So ran a bunch of businesses for 25 years all through high school and college. When I graduated from college, I started a menswear company making shirts like this that were much more interesting. And then in 1993, I discovered this wonderful thing called the web. The internet had been around, and I'd been using it. I grew up around computers because my father was from IBM, and I would go in on the weekends with him and play with mainframes, hardcore geek. I always looked at technology as a weapon you could use in any business, and it still is that. If you're ahead of the curve on technology, technology is a weapon. If you're on curve, technology is perhaps keeping up, and after that, it's just an expense and you're behind. So being ahead is a valuable thing in the tech space. So in '93, when Berners-Lee came out with www, by the way, great credit to this region and things around it for that ever happening. Probably the single largest contribution to human history that I've seen in my lifetime is the fact that that was created as a free product compared to Netscape, which is a little bit different. That to me seemed like the biggest thing I would see in my lifetime, and I wanted a piece of it. So I started a web business. It's one of the first e-commerce companies in the world, took that company public. I started the business in '93, took it public in '99, had a successful outcome, moved west, and got to California about 14 years ago. And I started to see this big gap in the market for fundraising between angel investing and venture investing. Angel investing in the old days used to be groups that would get together once a quarter to listen to pitches from the stage from some kid that sent in a PowerPoint deck 3 months before, went through a process to get selected, to come in and talk about what they were doing. And when they were done talking, they'd say, okay, who's interested? And 5 or 6 people would raise their hands, and they'd go off in a room somewhere, and then they'd spend a month or two trying to decide if they'd give this poor kid any money, and then they'd give him 10 grand. And so he'd scrape together, or she'd scrape together, $100,000. Very inefficient and very small. Venture over here was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and this is still true today. If you look back in time, in the 90s, sort of pre-95, 96, something like 97% of all venture firms were $100 million or less. Today, a venture firm with $100 million or less is one guy hanging out at home making his meetings happen in a coffee shop. Or one gal. I can think of one gal who doesn't have an office, and she does all her meetings in coffee shops, and she has a team of 5 people. It's tiny, right? And so these venture firms are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what happened because of that is as the venture firms got bigger, what do they then do? Well, they don't make more investments, because a VC at a tier 1 firm will make 1 or 2 investments a year at the Series A level. That's it. Most people believe you can be on about 8 boards before you start to lose productivity. It is actually quite time-consuming to be on the board of a company. And some investors provide great value. Some do not. Some are horrible, disastrous people that don't know what they're doing and try to tell entrepreneurs what they should do. But for the most part, there's a bunch of hardworking people, some of which are very smart, and they do tend to show up and help. So as these funds got bigger, the people couldn't do more deals. So instead, they had to put more money into the deals. So you had small deals over here in angel, and you had really big deals over here in venture capital. And the middle was this missing space, which now is called seed investing. So 10 years ago, I started a fund inside of another fund to do seed investing. I funded about 80 companies, half of them raised Series A and beyond. I was very involved with most of those companies raising money. I've probably been involved in about 200 rounds. I point all that out because when I'm talking about the experiences and learnings I've had in Silicon Valley, it comes from 25 years as an entrepreneur looking through the lens of what VCs were doing, learning to become one. So I was a seed investor for 8 years, then I became a traditional general partner at a traditional venture capital firm. So I have a lot of views of what venture does well and what venture does poorly. And the goal, when I mentioned 50% of the companies I funded in seed went on to raise Series A, I would argue that is an exceptionally high conversion rate. In 10 years, I didn't do this analysis, but when I joined the fund I was with, they did the analysis and said, wow, you've only lost 6% of the money you've ever invested. And I was like, so? They said, well, it's normal to lose 40. So far, I haven't lost a lot. And that's important not because, oh, I'm so great, but because of the type of entrepreneurs I fund. But also this approach of that many companies converting. Well, so go back behind that. This starts now on the part of what venture wants, what venture needs. I see at least 1,000 companies a year. When I was a seed investor, I would fund 7 to 10 of them. Over the last 2 years when I've been a venture capitalist, I funded 1.5 per year. I thought when I started out as a VC that I would be able to take less meetings and see less companies, but I was wrong because I didn't find the companies I needed. And that is sort of to the heart of the reality of what happens in classic venture capital investing, and there's a reason for it. How many of you are familiar with how venture funds actually work? So I'm going to give you detail here. Venture funds are made up of people that go out and raise money from LPs, limited partners. Those LPs give them money so that they will invest that money so they can make a return. In exchange for that, they get two things. They get fee and they get carry. Fee, have you heard the term 2 and 20? So this is the classic venture capital model. If you raise, let's use $100 million just to keep the math easy. You raise a $100 million fund, you get 2% per year, $2 million, to run the fund. That pays you, the venture capitalists, and your whole team, and your office space, and blah, blah, blah. And by the way, it's a very good living. And the danger of that is it's a very corrosive thing. The more money you raise, the more fees you get. So there's this motivation to raise more and more and more. But the more you raise, the less effective you become. Because like I said, you can only do so many deals. But the other side, what makes venture really exciting for the people I respect, is carry, that 20%. And the real numbers are you get between 2 and 3% in fees and 20 and 30% in carry. That 20%, and this is critical, this is what it all boils down to. You get 20% of the profits your investments make after you've returned all the money to your LPs, right? So if I raise a $100 million fund and I invest it and I get $100 million back, I make nothing in carry. But if I get WhatsApp, which exited for $19 billion, I'm typically going to own 20% of it. That's $3.8 billion. I give back $100 million, and I get 20% of $3.8 billion. I'm a very happy person. I've created a lot of wealth. Isn't that great? But that metric is important to understand because VC's jobs, first of all, a VC's real job is to say no. I've met many, many people that start out in venture. I always want to know what they've learned. And after about a year, they say, hey, I figured out what my job is. Really? Yeah, my job's to say no. Because you take 1,000 meetings a year. It's not really 1,000 meetings. You take 200 meetings. You go to events like this. You see demo days. People stand on stage, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, what you get paid for is what you do 99.7% of the time, which is say no, say no, say no, say no, until you find a deal that you cannot resist and you have to say yes. By the way, then you have to convince your partnership to do the deal, which on its own is a ridiculously difficult challenge. The bigger the partnership, the harder it becomes because your passion and energy has to be backed up by all those people around you. But let's go back to the numbers. So this $100 million fund, and by the way, remember I said nobody has a $100 million fund anymore? A great fund, many great funds have stayed small. Sequoia and Benchmark are probably tied for the 2 #1 funds in the world in terms of they have very sharp knives. You don't get it done. Here's one of the realities of venture capital. If you're a founder and you raise venture capital historically, 40% chance you will not survive as the CEO of that company. I like my friends at Sequoia, and I like at least 1 or 2 guys at Benchmark, but I'll tell you this, I bet the numbers are worse. You don't get it done, you're already dead. You know, I tell my entrepreneurs when they're raising money, Sequoia is awesome, and if they're the right firm for you, you should absolutely go there as long as you can handle stress, because the day they give you a check, they dug a grave in the backyard, and your job is to stay out of it. You get it done, or somebody else will. But think about that size. So they raise $400 million funds over and over and over again. Now, they do spin up other things. They do India and Asia and growth and all this stuff because everybody likes their fees, so why not, right? But they're very disciplined about keeping the fund at $400 million. So they've got to return the fund. So every partner wants the same thing. If I am going to matter in the world of venture capital over time, I need to be the one that returns the fund, because then everything changes for me, right? My LPs care about me more. My influence inside the firm's more important. I can help my entrepreneurs in ways that I couldn't before. $400 million fund. You can do the math. You're going to own, as a venture capitalist, 20% of a company. That means in order for you to do any investment, you have to believe it can return the fund, which in this case means you have to believe it can be a $2 billion outcome. Because $2 billion out is $400 million to your fund. And there's lots of great stories about this. I happen to pick on Sequoia a lot, but there's a great, great story about one of the partners going to one of his companies. This is a critical thing for people to understand about venture capital. It's only right for a certain type of business, and it's only right for a certain type of person. If your own desire is to build a business which you can sell for, say, $50 to $100 million, and you still own 80% of it because you only raised one seed round or whatever else, venture capital is absolutely positively not for you. Because the VC on the other side of the table wouldn't have done the deal if that's what he or she knew you wanted to do. And if you get that offer, there's a very good chance they're going to veto it, which they will have the right to do, because when you raise money from a venture capitalist, they have the right to veto a sale and oftentimes a future fundraising. So a particularly extreme example of this was a partner I won't name. We'll just pretend I didn't name their firm, from a great firm, goes down to LA to see one of his entrepreneurs that's got an offer to sell for a lot of money. I don't remember what the number was, 600 million, 800 million. And he goes in and he sits down and he says, so we need to talk about this, but before we do, do you know how I got here? Yeah, Bob, you flew. His name isn't Bob. Yeah, you know how I flew? You flew on your G5. You brag about your G5 all the time. Great. Do you know how I got that G5? Excuse me, because I'm going to curse here. I didn't fucking sell too early. Then he got up and left. And that company did not sell for $600, $800 million. Kept going. And I know people that have then gone on to have multi-billion-dollar exits, and I know people who have gone on to get nothing. But the reality is you are, once you take venture capital, part of a portfolio. Every VC needs to know that everybody in their portfolio is trying for the same thing, the big, big, big win. Think of a portfolio like a military endeavor. I happen to have backed half a dozen Israeli companies. They just happen to be great. But I've funded almost 100 companies, so it's not a disproportionately large size. But I think of my portfolio of entrepreneurs as the Israeli army, probably the best fighting force on the planet. But no matter how good a fighting force is, when they go to war, somebody is going to die. The individual soldier is not the issue. It's, do you take that hill? Do you win that battle? If you are going to take venture capital, you are an individual soldier. It is important to the venture capitalists that the group of you and entrepreneurs that you are not related to in any way, win the war they need, but it is not critical to them that you survive. And that is something I don't think people take to heart adequately, because most of the time I see entrepreneurs that want to raise venture capital that have good to great ideas, they would be better off not doing so. I'll give you an exact story. So there were two women that started a really interesting app that I met with years ago. I really liked the business. It was trending exceptionally well. And I said, this is a great business. I like what you're doing. It doesn't seem big enough to me for venture capital. I think you should keep this one tight. I think you should just, do what you can to raise money from whoever it is that won't sort of put you on that path. Friends and family, obviously, but angels as well. And I don't think you could raise venture even if you tried, but I'd be happy to help if I could. So about 2 months later, one of the women see each other at a trade show. She comes over, Ben, I got a term sheet from a VC. It's like, wow, that's surprising. Okay, good for you. I'm happy for you. Who is it? Oh, it's so-and-so. Like, wow, that's weird. I know so-and-so. He's a friend of mine. He worked at Microsoft. He retired. He hangs out. We work out together. He's not a VC. Oh, no, he's the newest partner at Firm X. By the way, here's a pro tip. If you shouldn't be able to raise venture capital, but you want to anyway, which you shouldn't, by the way, then you go to the new guy or the new gal. because they haven't learned the painful mistakes they're going to make yet. And their partners do not want to crush their soul. So if they fall in love with you, even if their partners know that they are going to lose all their money because it's a disastrous mistake for them to invest in you, they will often let them do it anyway after it's clear they can't convince them not to. So they say to themselves, well, John Doerr has this quote that like training a VC is like training a fighter pilot that loses at least one plane. You got to lose $8 or $10 million to figure it all out. So yes, it works. I've seen it work multiple times. In none of those instances, by the way, did the company survive. None. Now, I'm not saying that it's never worked. I'm just saying of all the instances I've seen when the person found their way to the new person who did the deal they shouldn't have, they never made it. And do you really want to spend 3 or 4 of your years in the next while just to find out it's not going to make it? Like the nice thing about seed investing, by the way, is you get to figure it out fast and decide if you want to go forward. Anyway, so I said, okay, well, that's great. He doesn't know what he doesn't know. Awesome. Glad you got some money. And she said, well, what should I do? What else should I do? Think about this. I was like, well, I think you should sit down with them and understand what success means to this person. What do you mean by that? Well, what does he or she, in this case it's a he, so I'm going to stop. Anytime I say he, just assume I mean gender neutral. But I'm just too lazy to always do it that way. What does he need? Well, she didn't have that conversation, because if she did, what he would have said is, I need a material return. I need to return the fund. I need to matter. I need to get real money out of this. I need you to succeed at a level that's hundreds of millions of dollars for us. But instead, she got exactly what I told her she would get. She got an offer from a company about 18 months later to buy the company for $20 million, which is exactly what I thought she'd get. I'm not always right. It just happened to be I was right this time, and so I like the story. So she gets this offer to be bought for $20 million, and she probably owns half the company still, so that's material to her. And what does my friend say? NFW. It's like, what do you think we're in this for? We invested $8 million in you at probably a 20 post. Why would we want this flat exit? I mean, this is not useful. But he was worried. He actually told me later, we work out together, and I was asking, he said, yeah, she was scared. I could tell it wasn't going to go forward, so I only have 2 choices now. I let her do it, or I fire her and replace her. Fortunately, he didn't fire her, but he made it really hard on her. He said as follows, I will support you if and only if I get all my money out in cash first before everybody. There's no escrow, and there's no sign off on any sort of representations. I don't know how many of you have ever been involved in an M&A deal, but all those things are deal-killing requests. Everybody wants to escrow 10 to 20%. Everybody wants to know that nobody committed a fraud, and they want the investors to sign off. And he said, none of that. Cash, now, no contingencies. And so she went back to the buyer. Now, as a buyer seeing this, what do you think happened? They didn't go away. That's the good news. But they did cut the offer in half. So instead of 20 million, she got 10. Now, if you remember, I already told you she raised 8 from this venture firm. When a venture firm invests in you, they have its preferred stock, which means that if you sell, they get their money first. So that 8 million comes off the top, even if you hadn't asked for it to. So then this poor woman has to go back to her seed investors, who probably gave her $1.5 million, and negotiate with them, which I actually don't feel that good about because they're the ones that took the most risk, to take a reduced payout so that she'll get something. Terrible, disastrous outcome. I mean, I can't think of a worse scenario. All these years put in, and in the end, she gets probably absolutely nothing except a job, which she quits later because she doesn't care. She's on some lockup. You always get locked up. You have these earnouts. Anyway, not a great scenario. Be really, really careful what you wish for. And so if you think about venture, the first thought you should have is, what do I need? What do I as an entrepreneur need to achieve in my life to be happy? And then solve for not having that taken away from you. If you are going to be happy with 10 million, 20 million, 50 million, $100 million outcomes, that is awesome for you. I'm not going to opine on that. I used to get all upset about those sort of things, and I realized what a jerky thing that was to do. I mean, I didn't have money. I was, an entrepreneur with 2 sticks. I used all my own cash. Don't take venture capital, because venture capital doesn't want that exit. What you need to be able to show someone you can do is build something truly enormous. My friend Scott Sandell at NEA has a great quote that I love to steal, which is, we like to invest in enormous markets that don't exist yet. They're a $3.3 billion current fund. They manage over $25 billion. Now, you're not going to return their fund. I mean, although they've gotten pretty damn close to it on some deals, and they got close to it on deals where they helped entrepreneurs see why they shouldn't sell. I mean, I have seen this go really, really well. An entrepreneur that they had an opportunity to sell for $300 million, and their board member helped them see why that wasn't the best option and gave them founders liquidity, and then they ended up with what is currently about a $6 billion public company. Think about how awesome that is for the entrepreneur, by the way. Yes, they took a lot of risk, but forget about the material gain, because if you have 100 million in the bank or $1 billion in the bank, other than the fact you can be charitably really generous, I'm not sure if your life changes that much. You know, I guess unless you want to collect something weird like jets or yachts. Like, what is the difference to you? Can you not spend the interest on $100 million? I mean, who can do that? That's just a stunning amount of money to get rid of. So, having said that, it's still material to that entrepreneur because they now run a public company of material value and substance and are able to influence things in a way that they couldn't have done with their $100 million sitting on the sideline. It's a rare thing, but when you are pursuing it in your own mind first, then venture is an appropriate place to go. But just, you have to be a little bit crazy, a little bit arrogant, or just, have some vision of the world that you have to see come true. And this is, no person that has ever pitched venture capital more than once will ever say their opportunity is anything less than $1 billion opportunity. Well, it's at least $1 billion opportunity because of blah, blah, blah. Yeah, whatever. Everybody that has ever invested in somebody that's going to go raise venture capital tells them, listen to the great podcast Reid Hoffman did with Airbnb, how they said, 30 million, that's not big enough. Put a B in front of it. Venture capitalists like to hear billions. You do have to pitch a certain sort of thing, but what's more important than that is what you believe your business needs to be for you. Because if you are going to be happy with $100 million out and the offer comes, you're going to want to take it, and it's going to get really ugly, and you're going to be really unhappy. So go back to some other ways, though, to think about funding. So I think seed is a really interesting space right now. Over the last 10 years, seed has developed quite significantly. Seed investing used to be about $1 million of capital for an entrepreneur with a great idea. It's now grown to anywhere from $1 million to 2 to 3 to 5. It's sort of crazy how big it's become. Sources of capital are changing. Traditional venture firms are still a big part of it, but now you've got seed investors growing bigger and bigger. You've got sovereign wealth funds coming in. You've got China and Russia and just all these massive sources of capital. You've got people doing SPVs, special purpose vehicles, where they can sort of add on to people's existing investments. It's just getting really crazy. So there is a sickening amount of money sloshing around. Seed investing is really useful because people come in and they say, look, so I said I need 5 things to make an investment. People, 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 a great idea, and a huge market if it works. But I only wanted entrepreneurs that I believed could raise venture capital when it did work, hence the 50% conversion rate. Seed investing allows you to prove a thesis. It doesn't allow you to build a business. You get to prove enough of a thesis to figure out whether this is a business that should raise venture or not. And that can be very useful to you and to the financial side of it. You only give up typically about 20% of your company in a seed round, or you should only give about, every round, by the way, should give up about 20%. If you want to think of a rule of thumb, I've seen things go much worse than that. They almost never go better. You do a round of seed, you probably give up 20%. You do the A, you probably give up 20%. You do the B, you give up 20%. And then thereafter, you can give up less if you're growing like crazy. But if you can do a seed round, then you can figure out whether the business is what you think it's going to be. Because we all have ideas of what life looks like for us, but we don't necessarily know what the outcome's going to look like. Once you put it out there in the live world, you get to figure out whether it is what you hoped it would be or not. And those metrics, and I'll make one last point, and then I want to open up for questions. Those metrics will help you determine whether this is a venture scale business. Venture, you probably heard the term the hockey stick, right? You know, that everything grows like that. And now there's the J curve, where it actually costs a lot of money before it grows like that. So when I moved to Silicon Valley, I thought that everybody there was focused on investing in what is now called the knee of the curve, this place right here, right before that maybe. But they wanted smart people with great ideas. They don't. Venture capital firms are so big right now, what they want, for the most part, there are exceptions, and we could talk about them if you want. They want smart people with great ideas that are crushing it. Because they don't need to get a good deal. They need to get the right deal. Venture capitalists are like Ferrari collectors. They do not want to go into the Ferrari store and buy the Ferrari that's there that any old person can walk in with a lot of money and buy. It's not interesting to them. What they want is the one that comes up for auction once a decade and costs millions of dollars in perfect condition that will go up in value. They don't want a good deal. They want the deal. And they can pay what they need to pay. And so they wait till you're here. And this got exacerbated tremendously by Facebook. And for those of you, so this will be the closing point, that don't know that story, Excel doubled the bid and paid $52 million for Facebook. And Facebook is worth now a couple $100 million, I think. A couple $100 billion. So I saw some of these inside numbers. It was in the first round of Facebook. They made 4,900 times their money. That is the dream of everybody in venture capital. Almost 5,000 times their money. They put in $25,000 and they made 49 million. I'm not talking about Excel. Excel did very, very well. That's what they need. That's what they want. And so what the message has become is, if it's Facebook, we can pay whatever we need to. But they were willing, again, to double the bid. That's like, this Ferrari's $1 million, I'll pay 2. Anybody else? No. Okay, you can have it. Move on, next person. That is what venture wants. They want to see things that are so exciting they cannot resist. Seed helps you get to that point, and hopefully the seed people you work with will be smart enough to figure out whether, if you get to the point you want to get to, anybody else will care. And you should probably have a tour guide and someone to help you get connected and on and on and on. But we got 10 minutes left. So with that, I will open it up to all the questions you've been thinking about, because you're going to give me lots of questions, right? Because then I'll actually feel I've achieved something.
What's to
ask? The throw around.
That VC is not the perfect source for funds for many entrepreneurs. So what do you think about this now trending and everybody's talking about ICOs? Is it just a hype? Is it a bubble? Is it the future?
It's great for whoever already did it. One of my entrepreneurs wanted to talk about raising a fund with ICOs and reached out to me a while back, and I'm like, it seems like it's a little late. In that, entrepreneurs will often, when you do a really, really early stage investing, sometimes it doesn't work out. And when it doesn't work out, they come to you and they say, what should we do now? Can you help me think about it? And the question always starts with, what's hot now? And my answer is the same as it will be for ICOs. That's the wrong question. Whatever's hot right now, too late for you. The most successful ICO I've seen, the guy's been working on it for 3 or 4 years. We were on stage together, and everybody wanted to ask about it. I do think there's interesting stuff. But one, the SEC is already saying it needs to be a registered security, so that screws a lot of stuff up. China shut it all down. The biggest issue I see with ICOs over time, hey, if you can make money that way and get it into your business and go run your business, more power to you. It just seems like a lot of people are in that pipeline. By the time you get through the system, it almost certainly will be too late. Maybe I'm wrong. The biggest issue I see is there are no market makers. So you're going to have a totally illiquid stock. It's like in the old days in New York, or used to have the NASDAQ, which had these pink sheets where they'd print out the really, really, really cheap stocks and send them to brokers once a day. Nobody's going to trade this stuff after the speculative bubble has gone, which means that whatever you did, now people are trapped in. It's like buying a bond and then trying to sell it again when nobody cares. So, there is a lot of hype. I think there's some really interesting things that will come out of it, but I think the death rate will be ridiculous in terms of just totally illiquid stuff. Mm-hmm. Any other brave souls want the big blue cube?
Yeah, up here in the front. Hold on, you can... Cyril, take another beautiful. Yeah.
So the second part of what he asked for is, what are those markets that don't exist yet that are $1 billion worth and that you are looking at right now?
So it's it was funny, for a long time people would come to me and say, what are you excited about now? And I was always, slightly bugged by that question, only because I never had an answer. The firm I was at used to say it was a thesis-based investing firm, and I was like, So we finally came up with that I could address it. I'm like, I have a thesis. It's finding the next thesis. I have no idea. My job, the way I internalize what I do, is I meet as many entrepreneurs as I can looking for one that makes me say, wow. And then I get excited, because entrepreneurs will show me a vision of the future I didn't think of. There are some people that will sort of categorically say, I'm interested in, look, I like marketplaces, I like fintech, I like all kinds of stuff. But it's easier for me to say what I don't focus on, and that's sort of deep enterprise, hard tech stuff that bores me because I had to do it and I don't want to ever do it again, and probably medical device stuff because there's just all kinds of things I don't want to have to learn about there. But the biggest markets are ones that haven't occurred to me. I'll give you some examples of things I've done recently, though. I invested in a company called Transfix, which is sort of Uber meets AWS for commercial trucking. Everything on the planet, except babies, as my founder likes to say, is delivered by truck. It is a staggeringly enormous business that has been untouched by technology. It's like that, what was that movie where people went back to the days of the dinosaurs, as if dinosaurs and people ever lived together, right? That untouched region. It's like that. It's stunning. So about 3 years ago, I funded them. Insurance tech has been interesting. I just funded, as I was mentioning somebody in the audience earlier, an aqua farming business, which I almost didn't take that meeting. It was an entrepreneur I respected, made the referral, so I was like, okay. And by the way, if you're going to Silicon Valley, you want to raise money, always get the warm intro. No matter what you do, try to get the warm intro. The over-the-transom stuff never works. Even if it's just buttonholing people at conferences like this, that's better than just showing up over the, hey, I'm sending a LinkedIn in-mail, like, making those things terrible. But entrepreneurs are thinking about the future all the time. Amazingly, though, as soon as you find one that's doing something amazing you'd never thought of, 2 others are doing it almost immediately. It's just this fascinating reality of how life works. I'm in some things in this. The auto space is somewhat interesting to me. I'm in aqua farming, but it's not like I'm looking at aqua farming. I like the way he's thinking about the business. I might do something else there, but I'm not now making a proactive effort to go out and find it. I did make a mistake, though, not doing that. I funded Lending Club, which was the first peer-to-peer lending company. Then I funded Cabbage, which was the first sort of business lending company. I funded Realty Mogul, which was real estate. And all along, I thought, it'd be great to have something like this for student loans. And someone pitched me, I thought they were going to pitch me Lending Club for student loans, and it wasn't. It was like a dashboard. And I was like, oh, why don't you do peer-to-peer lending for student loans? Oh, that would never work. Worked really well for SoFi, but I didn't go out and find them. So there are, sometimes it is smart to figure out there's something great that could be done and to go search it out and find it, but it's not the way I work. 1,000 times a year I look at something, and 1 or 2 times I say, wow, and that makes me happy.
Awesome. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? In the back? Yep.
You said you were an entrepreneur before. Now you're investing in companies. Are you not tempted to become an entrepreneur again, or to mingle too much into that business?
There are 2 different questions, tempted versus mingling. I'm often tempted. In fact, I had this one idea I've been saving for like 10 years, and when I started to get to know VCs, I picked one I really liked. I had him over to the house for wine, and I said, I have this idea. I told him. He was like, okay. It's like, oh, it was a great idea. I was like, yeah. It was a great idea. Ideas are worthless. Execution is critical. Meddling too much, different question. I am very proactive in the amount of time and energy I give my entrepreneurs. Having said that, my goal is I've got 25 years of entrepreneurship behind me. I took a lot of arrows in the back. I would prefer my entrepreneurs not make the mistakes I made, and if I can show them a story that helps them see why it's a mistake, I will. It is not my job, nor is it any venture capitalist job that truly understands what they do, and by the way, a lot of them don't, to tell an entrepreneur what to do. Board members are not there to tell you what to do. Look, the only real control, a friend of mine, David Hornick at August Capital, said this once. He likes music. He said, I used to think on the board I was like a DJ, where I had one of those big boards, and I'm doing all this stuff, these sliders and these things. And he said, but then one day I looked behind the board and it wasn't plugged in. All I had was the power switch. The only thing a board member can really do is decide whether you keep being the CEO. And I don't think any board member that I respect, and even some of the ones I don't, want to have that nuclear event if they can avoid it any way possible. So my attitude is quite simply that you can only influence your entrepreneurs, and most of this comes from as a seed investor. My investments were very small in money, but my time was meaningful. And what I realized is I can only influence my entrepreneurs through the mutual respect and trust that is engendered. I would often say that I was a better parent to my entrepreneurs, and I do take a pretty paternal feeling about it, even though they're usually, I don't feel like they're older than I am or younger, even though they are. I just want to be 23 for the rest of my life. I'm a better parent to my entrepreneurs than I am to my kids. Because I won't yell at my kids. Sorry, I won't yell at my entrepreneurs. I wish I didn't yell at my kids. I've stopped yelling at them. But, the protectiveness I feel both of my entrepreneurs in that way and my belief that if I cross that line, I will lose influence. I honestly believe if I just did the same thing with my kids, they're great, they're awesome, I love my kids, they're very well adjusted. Except for one, maybe I yelled at them too much. It's a balance, though. And I think great investors understand that in many ways they are stock pickers, and they are there to help, but it always has to be the entrepreneur's idea, or at least the entrepreneur's choice. And impregnating entrepreneurs with ideas is something we try very hard to do if we believe it's important to them. And the tricky part, we've only got 49 seconds left, so I'll give that.
We got another 10 minutes. This is actually.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So if anybody's in the market for building new timers, actually, that's a.
Oh, well, good to know. I was totally obsessed with being on time.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I don't know if you noticed, but Max spot on 30 minutes, he stopped. It was like, wow.
Switzerland.
I know.
You know, I tell you.
Am I getting a watch after this?
Yeah.
The relationship between an entrepreneur and their board member should be incredibly important to both parties. The party that has to worry about it the most, though, is the entrepreneur. Because when you take money from a venture capitalist, you are entering into a one-way prenup. They can divorce you, and you cannot divorce them. And that is true even at the seed round in some cases. There are a lot of different types of venture capitalists because there are a lot of different types of human beings. And they've had lots of different experiences. I was an entrepreneur, and everything I do is colored by my experience as an entrepreneur. There are a lot of people that are not entrepreneurs that are VCs. I didn't used to believe they could be any good. I've learned that they can be. In fact, they can be exceptional, maybe on a slightly lower conversion rate than the ones that used to be entrepreneurs. When you think about an investor, though, one of the things you should remember, I'm assuming that you now have truly got a venture scale opportunity ahead of you. You've got a 7 to 10 year journey, maybe longer, from here to big outcome or IPO, right? That journey is long and hard, and it's a lot harder than you think it's going to be. Now, if you've already been an entrepreneur for a couple of years, you already know how hard it is, right? It's ridiculously hard. Every single entrepreneur that I've ever come across, myself included, stares into the valley of death at some point. They walk right up to the edge of a cliff that will kill them without doubt, and they have nowhere else to go, and they stare down there into those jaws of all the ravaging dogs of life that are going to try to rip them apart, and they say, how am I going to get across it? By the way, the losers give up and walk away, and you should never fund them, and you should never be one of them, because if that's who you are, if you're not willing to suffer ridiculous amounts of pain, this is the wrong journey for you. But that memory, I remembered, we were about to miss payroll. I had a startup, the one that went public. I put everything I had into it, and we were right here. I was out of cash, $200,000 in debt and a credit card, and payroll was 2 days away, and we were out of money. And I had one chance of getting that money from one party. And I went into that meeting knowing if I didn't come out with that money, we had to shut the company down. The difference between me being down there dead and not was that meeting and my desire and passion and energy and luck. By the way, it all takes luck. No matter how good you are, how smart you are, how great your idea is, if you do not have some luck along the way, you are screwed. Luck is the combination of timing and opportunity. Timing could be called luck. You know, it's the harder you work, the luckier you get. But sometimes it just doesn't matter. You've got to be lucky. We get to be lucky. Venture capitalists have to remember that luck matters to them too. Do you think, so MySpace, Friendster, Facebook. You think the VCs that invested in Friendster made a mistake? Who here even remembers Friendster, by the way? Anybody? Okay, for those of you who don't know it, it was just like Facebook long before Facebook, and the growth was ridiculous, and it was the hottest deal around. And it's just as bankrupt today. It never got there. But at the time, anybody that won that deal was an absolute stud, because that was, and it was Kleiner and Benchmark. Top people. But whether it was timing or technical flaws or God knows, but there's some great, if you want to see how close someone can come, there's a great podcast on it. Here's somebody that came that close to what's now worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and instead he's trying his third business. It's a tough one. So being of aid is important for me. It's important for some. But remember, whoever you pick, for 10 years, you should assume you're sitting across the table from them at a board meeting. And remember also that stat I gave you that 40% of entrepreneurs that raise venture capital do not survive as the CEO? Well, I took my company public. There was a board of us of 4. Me, somebody I trusted, and 2 people that wanted to run my company, who were 30 years older than me that didn't know dick, in my opinion. This is not going anywhere live, is it? I hope. I'm good.
Hi, folks at home.
Yeah, sorry about that. If I did not have control of that company, I would absolutely, positively have been fired. And that company also would have been bankrupt because they were wrong. But instead, we had a really great outcome. We had it only because I never raised venture capital. So I had control of my business. And they couldn't fire me. Therefore, they couldn't be wrong. But it was a miserable, acrimonious time in my life. I have never had meetings that were so draining. In fact, I learned the word acrimonious in a board meeting when the guy I trusted said, I just wish these meetings could be less acrimonious. And I was like, I don't know what that word means. Oh, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's where we are. So I'm very passionate about finding my entrepreneurs the right investors. I'm a firm believer that you want the right people across the table, because as I was about to finish, if you get moved out, you're not going to be happy. I mean, you hopefully will at least get promoted to chairman or moved over to chief visionary or CTO or something. But if you get fired, you are never going to be happy about that. The difference in my mind, though, is if you get fired by somebody that you believe did it because they felt they were doing what was right for the company, it was the right thing for the organization, and they were doing it with integrity, and you trust and respect them, you will get over it. And if you don't believe those things, you will be bitter till the day you die. The co-founder of Cisco is a woman who the first time I came across her was out of Cisco for like 6 or 8 years with $200 million, and the visceral anger of her being fired was still obvious. I think when she dies, it'll be on her tombstone. I got kicked out of my company, right? So that balance, that relationship is super important. And lastly, I did say I was finishing that point, but sometimes one person can make a tremendous difference. Sometimes they can show you that thing you didn't quite notice. Maybe that thing isn't a little hill of ice. Maybe it is an iceberg. Maybe it's something else. Maybe I've hit it. You know, if I hit an iceberg, why do you need to hit an iceberg? Anybody else?
Perfect. Yeah, we have time for a couple more questions. Yep, in the middle there. We'll throw it to the middle. Yep, there we go.
There are more and more companies that try to combine technology with doing good. Have you had experiences with impact investing, and do you think that it has to be treated differently, or do you see any challenges there?
Generally, I think it's best treated differently. I have had a couple of companies I've been fortunate enough to invest in that I thought would do well and do good. They haven't worked out. So maybe that's not where I'm getting my luck. The challenge is you're sort of, fish or fowl. If you've got too many, it's the biggest weakness of most entrepreneurs that we all, myself included, all have to learn is the power and strength of focus. And so it's sometimes very difficult to have competing agendas. Now, there are some great firms. As an example, Bill Draper, the original Draper, who was a very successful venture capitalist, has started a fund which is exclusively built to invest in truly charitable efforts, but treat it like a venture capitalist would in terms of making sure to help and try to build the right team. I love nothing more than when a business I see has positive social good that it can achieve as well, but I do believe it is a weakness for me to let that influence me. Because ultimately I want to believe that I will do well eventually through my ability to deploy additional capital into the world. I think Bill Gates is probably doing tremendous things. I think a lot of people that have the ability to be philanthropic are doing tremendous things. Here's a great example. So Warren Buffett, for the first time ever, took part in an interview for a movie about himself. It's on Netflix now. It's worth watching. He was famously never philanthropic, never gave money away, just really tight ass about it. His wife, however, was very philanthropic. And he said once, the best thing I can do for any philanthropic effort is to keep investing money because I'm so damn good at it. He didn't say it that way. But he's done so well. Wouldn't it be better to grow and grow and grow? Now, unfortunately, his wife died, and he has become apparently much more philanthropic, maybe as a legacy for her. But it's a great thing if you can get it, but you first got to decide the business makes sense. And there are great businesses that have gone on to do, so Salesforce, tremendous, like #1 growth company over the last 5-10 years, doing tremendously well financially, and it has this mantra of give 1%, like 1% of profits, 1% of time, 1% of stock to charitable good, right? There's an organization in Silicon Valley that does some great stuff where they go to entrepreneurs early and they say, hey, contribute some of your founding stock now when it's effectively worthless into this charitable trust so that if it becomes worth a lot, you can deploy it all tax-free and all this great stuff. So there's some things you can do. I used to encourage entrepreneurs to try to spend time there. I would love to see it done. It can be. And the last point is, if you're pitching a business that's about a social good, the biggest challenge is, will the venture capitalists believe are you there to save the world, or are you there to do something else? Now, every entrepreneur has a passion about changing the world. It is almost humorous. If you watch the show Silicon Valley on HBO, it makes me laugh every time because it's also true. But it's like, we're going to change the world and make it a better place by redefining the enterprise stack for cloud computing software layers using Kubernetes. And it's like, yeah, who cares about that? But there are plenty of businesses that bake in all kinds of things. Another point, by the way, I'm not going to try to defend the fact that I focus on businesses that can be really big businesses. I do think it's a social good to create enormous amounts of employment. Now, some technologies are a risk to employment, But you've got a company, I had a company, I remember that it got to almost 500 people over 4 years. And it was sort of cool. Like, wow, that's pretty neat that the 2 people I funded created 398 extra jobs that are paying well and that the people are enjoying. So there's a long answer. It should have just been, it's great if it's truly about a social good for people that are double and triple bottom line, and those things are taking off like crazy, and the foundations want to do it. There's lots and lots of sources of capital. But in order for you to get venture capital for a social good business, the business itself has to be ridiculously great in the first place, and then the social good is a bonus. There was somebody behind you, I think.
Thank you.
You've been talking a lot about venture capital, but not so much about seed money. Also, you were saying to entrepreneurs, you rather recommend going for the seed money stage and not necessarily going up to the venture capital stage. So where do you see the difference between a seed investor versus an venture capital investor, except of the money invested?
So it varies tremendously. In fact, I wrote a story for TechCrunch that should run pretty soon about the coming war in venture capital. The top seed investors are now bidding directly for Series A's. They're doing 2 things. They're not releasing their own companies that should be graduating up to Series A to the world. They're just doing it themselves. And then they're bidding against venture capital firms for Series A. So there is a real blurring of the lines. Having said that, there's lots of different types of seed investors. Seed isn't an alternative to venture so much. I view it as the money that allows you to figure out the type of business you should build. Meaning you're going to travel down this path and you're going to come to a road one day. I think of it as the happy moment in the bar where you and your co-founder or friend are sitting there and you're drinking or whatever you're doing, and you say, yeah, I see where this can go. I really get it now. Now that we've released the product and we've got 1 million app users or blah, 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 I can see the path. I know what this could look like. And it looks like, I'm going to only use the financial terms for a second, even though that, not because it's all about money, but just to get overly simple. I see this being a great thing for Condé Nast to buy for $50 million. Okay, never raise venture. Or I see this being the next Facebook. Well, yeah, go raise venture. The seed money just allows you to prove enough to figure that out. And within seed, there are a lot of different types of investors because you've got these other changes where, AngelList has done some interesting things in seed. A lot of people have created syndicates. There's a new book out called Angel. The guy that wrote it, Jason Calcanis, has built a really big syndicate of investors. And so those people have different tolerances for what an outcome might look like. I'll give you an example of why this is important. I seeded a company a while back. And when I was running my seed practice, I didn't make people have board meetings, but I had faux board meetings where they'd have the discipline without the responsibility, meaning I wasn't going to vote. I was just going to get them ready for their A. And they asked if I could invite 2 other people that were investors. One I knew and I had no problem with. The other was this sort of typical angel. And I was like, I don't know. I just feel like there's going to be a conflict. And they said it would really, really be useful to us. Fine. Entrepreneur always wins, by the way. They always have to win. I mean, unless they're literally, over here at the Valley of Death and they're diving in like, I'm going to jump. Maybe then you try to pull them back. And so he came to the meeting and we were talking and the entrepreneur said, I'm going to go see Google and it's going to be a great meeting. And the guy said, yeah, and maybe they'll offer you $15, $20, $30 million and we can sell. And I was like, no, we can't. Like, what do you mean? You put in money at $3 million, you'd make 10x. Like, yeah, that's not what I'm in this for. By the way, that's something else you should understand that I didn't talk about. It ain't about 10x at all. I'll keep answering your question in a second, but this is something I should have said. I'll go back to Sequoia because they're fun to poke at because they're so damn good. I was in the office of one of their partners long ago, and he was sitting there, and I'm going to do his facial movements because they were so weird because we were all alone. And we're talking about venture capital, and he's like, Ben, you know how these people in Silicon Valley brag about their 10x's? You know how some of them brag about their 100x's? And remember, he's in a room by himself. It's just me, and I don't know what he's looking for. Anyway, he's like, we don't give a shit about those. We want 1,000x. We've had 4 of them. And I remember thinking, yeah, great, where's yours? So behind him was a whiteboard with all his investments written out. You know what the top one was? Now remember, this was 8 years ago. LinkedIn. Pretty sure they made 1,000x on that first round investment. So it is really about shooting for something much more significant. The size of firm will change that. That is relevant to your question because different seed investors think different ways. For me as a seed investor, if I believe you will sell for $50 to $200 million, I will not invest in your company. Because my job was always and still is, and it's the discipline I want, is to find people at that early stage, people, great idea, huge market if it works, that I believe can go on and go the journey all the way if everything works out and they get lucky and they work hard. So you've got to also be really careful at the seed level, and seed is incrementally different than angel. in that it's more institutionalized and they have funds and everything else. But you need to find out what they need and what they want. And I do believe, whether it's seed or venture or anybody, if you are taking money from people that have a different goal than what you believe in your heart of hearts is what you need to achieve, you are setting yourself for an enormous amount of pain. And I've been in meetings. I was with one of the people I mentioned a minute ago. He was having these entrepreneurs pitch us, and one of them pitched this thing, and he said, well, you got to tell them it's $1 billion outcome. Without that, they're not going to do anything. And I was like, and he's looking at me, he's like, you don't agree, do you? I was like, I don't care what size the outcome is. I care, I do for me, but I care that you tell me what you need the outcome to be. Because yeah, you're going to get a no from me if you tell me it's going to be $200 million, but think about how much worse it is otherwise. So there's lots and lots and lots and lots of layers of seed. There's so many people. I mean, you Google seed investing, and there's got to be 1,000 funds at this point. I heard that 251 individuals are out there trying to raise seed funds right now. It's crazy. There are, here's the quick numbers, 19,000 companies seeded a year. There's 1,900 venture rounds done. Now, that doesn't mean there's a 10% conversion rate, because venture rounds includes follow-on rounds. The B that happened after the A, the C that happened after the B. So you should figure 5% of companies that get seeded actually go on to raise venture capital at best. But it's a very vibrant ecosystem, and I will point out that historically, it has been, the desire level for types of outcomes is different outside of, not just outside the US. California, Silicon Valley, is its own distinct Shangri-La. It draws the most talented people from all around the world. Doesn't mean there aren't great communities here and everywhere else. But just like Florence during the Renaissance, the concentration of substance and quality of a certain art form, the art form of entrepreneurship, is so strong that it draws like a ridiculous magnet. I've met people from every corner of the planet. It's amazing who ends up there. I funded a Polish PhD who had 23 people working for the last 4 years in Warsaw who moved to Silicon Valley because he knew that this was the right opportunity, he wanted to fund it. So anyway, but I do find that outside of Silicon Valley, expectations are different. Valuations are different, they're lower. Outcomes have to be different, therefore they're lower than the big outcomes that we must have. European history has always shown that sort of the round size will be smaller, but the outcomes can also be smaller. So there's, figuring out what community you're going to raise in is also super important.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think that's all we have time for. I already went a bit over, but I really liked the discussion a lot. So thank you very much, guys. A big round of applause.
Thank you.
And then hold on. For the flight back, awesome. A pair of headphones and a carry-on size compatible bag.
Awesome. I'll stay around for lunch if anybody missed out on the chance to.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Random rant. Thank you.
Another round of applause, folks.